Jake Williams had always known what it was like to struggle. His life was one of constant hardship, but it wasn't the kind of struggle that made headlines. No one would ever write a story about Jake's life. No one would ever think twice about the boy with worn-out shoes, who walked the same cracked sidewalk every morning to get to his rundown school. Follow the whole story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment to let us know where you are watching the video. It motivates us to share more impactful stories. His mother had passed away when he was just 5, and his father, well, he had disappeared even before that. Jake was raised by his grandmother, who lived in a small, weather-beaten house on the edge of town. Despite the poverty, his grandmother always told him he was capable of achieving great things. But the world around him didn't offer much hope. That morning, Jake stood in front of his grandmother's house, clutching an old, broken phone. The screen was cracked, and half the buttons didn't work. It was the only connection he had to the outside world, but even that was starting to slip away. His grandmother had fallen ill again. The doctors said it was her heart this time, and they didn't have enough money for the treatment she needed. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a car engine roaring in the distance. Jake's gaze lifted, and his heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just any car. It was a sleek black Tesla, gliding effortlessly toward him. His stomach dropped. He had seen Teslas before, on TV, in the magazines his grandmother used to buy, but never up close, never like this. He blinked twice, wondering if his mind was playing tricks on him. The car slowed down, then stopped right in front of the driveway. The door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in black, and wore a pair of sunglasses even though it wasn't particularly bright outside. He looked out of place, almost too perfect for this neighborhood. Jake stood frozen. Was this real? Who was this man? Then, the man spoke. "You're Jake, right?" Jake blinked again, his mouth suddenly dry. "Why, yeah, I'm Jake. Who are you?" The man smiled, an easy grin that seemed to break the tension in the air. "I'm Elon Musk." Jake's heart skipped a beat. His mind raced, but it was impossible to comprehend. Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, the inventor of SpaceX, the guy everyone talked about on the news. Why was he here? Why was he talking to Jake, of all people? You're Elon Musk?" Jake stammered, his voice cracking. Elon nodded, still smiling. "Yes, I am. I've been watching you." Jake felt the blood drain from his face. This had to be a joke, right? Was this some kind of prank? Maybe his friend Tommy had something to do with it. But no, Tommy was never this creative. I don't understand," Jake managed to say. Elon took a step forward, his voice lowering. "I've been following the competition you entered, the coding contest. I've seen the work you've done, Jake. You've got something special. I want to help you." All of this, he gestured around the street, at the dilapidated houses and the broken pavement, can change, but only if you're willing to take a leap. Jake felt as though the world had suddenly stopped spinning. His knees felt weak, and he had to grip the fence to keep from falling. Was he dreaming? This couldn't be happening. "What do you mean?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elon took off his sunglasses, revealing a serious look behind his eyes. "I'm offering you a chance, Jake. A real chance to change everything. But first, I need you to trust me. You're going to have to step out of your comfort zone and do something no one else has done before. Are you ready for that?" Jake's breath caught in his throat. This was insane. He'd always dreamed of a life outside this small town, of doing something important, of making a real difference. But this was beyond his wildest dreams. But was he ready for it? Could he handle what was being asked of him? I don't know what to say," Jake stammered, still in disbelief. "I mean, this is crazy." Elon stepped closer, placing a hand on Jake's shoulder. "I know it's overwhelming, but sometimes life offers us an opportunity we never expect. If you want to change your life, if you want to save your grandmother and make your dreams come true, you need to make a choice. Stay here, or come with me and take the chance." Jake's mind raced. Could he really leave everything behind? Could he trust this man who had suddenly appeared out of nowhere? But then he thought about his grandmother, lying sick in bed, and the years of struggling, wondering if things would ever get better. His heart clenched. This was his shot, his one real shot to change everything. His hands trembled as he made his decision. "I'll do it," Jake said, his voice steady, though his mind was anything but. "I'll trust you." Elon smiled, his eyes twinkling with something like approval. "Good. That's the first step. The rest? Well, we'll figure that out together." Jake's pulse was racing. He had no idea what was coming next, but for the first time in his life, he felt a spark of hope, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as powerless as he thought. The world was changing, and Jake, the boy who had nothing, was about to be part of it. So, what would you do if someone like Elon Musk showed up at your door and offered you the chance of a lifetime? Would you take that leap of faith? Let us know in the comments below. Jake had always known that life wasn't fair. Growing up in a small, run-down town with no father to guide him and a mother who had passed away when he was just 5, he learned early on that survival was all that mattered. The world never seemed to give him much of a chance, but somehow, Jake managed to keep going, driven by the hope that someday things would get better. He often wondered what it would have been like if his mother were still alive. She had always been the light in their home, a beacon of love and hope. Jake could barely remember her, but the stories his grandmother told him kept her alive in his heart. She had been the kind of woman who believed anything was possible if you worked hard enough. But when she died, the world felt colder. His father, who had been in and out of the picture for years, disappeared completely, leaving Jake to fend for himself. His grandmother, who had raised him as best she could, wasn't much better off. The little money she earned working as a seamstress barely covered the rent, let alone food or medical expenses. Still, she never complained. Jake often found her sitting at the kitchen table late at night, sewing by the dim light of a flickering lamp, a smile always on her face despite the exhaustion in her eyes. Jake tried to help as much as he could. He did what he could to bring in money, taking on odd jobs like mowing lawns or washing cars for neighbors. But it was never enough. And so, he grew up feeling like an outsider, watching other kids with their new clothes, their expensive toys, and their full refrigerators. He knew he wasn't like them. He never would be. But there was one thing Jake had that most of the other kids didn't. A mind that was always working, always thinking. He'd always been obsessed with technology, even though he didn't have access to the latest gadgets or equipment. His passion for computers and coding started when he was just a little kid. He had an old desktop computer that his grandmother had found at a garage sale, and even though it was slow and outdated, Jake taught himself how to make it work. By the time he was in high school, Jake had become known as the tech kid. He could fix almost anything, from broken phones to malfunctioning laptops. He even built his own computer out of spare parts, something most kids his age couldn't even begin to understand. But despite his talent, no one took him seriously. He wasn't the popular kid, the one with the fancy clothes or the latest sneakers. He was the quiet, awkward kid who sat in the back of class, always scribbling code on his notebook or tinkering with his phone. And then there was Tommy. Tommy was Jake's only real friend. They'd known each other since grade school. Unlike Jake, Tommy wasn't into technology, but he was a good kid, and he understood what it was like to live on the edge, to not have everything handed to you on a silver platter. He was the kind of friend who would help Jake carry groceries when his grandmother was too sick to do it herself, the kind of friend who would share his lunch when Jake didn't have any money for food. Tommy was the one who had convinced Jake to enter the national coding competition. At first, Jake wasn't sure if he had a chance. After all, he was just a kid from a poor town, competing against some of the brightest minds in the country. But Tommy didn't let him back out. "You've got this, man," Tommy had said, his voice full of conviction. "You're better than half of those kids, even if they don't know it yet." The competition was Jake's last shot at something big. The grand prize was a scholarship to one of the best tech universities in the country, along with a cash reward that could change everything for him and his grandmother. He'd poured his heart and soul into the project, staying up late into the night, sacrificing weekends with Tommy just to finish the code. He knew it wasn't perfect, but it was his best work, and it was the only shot he had at a future. But life had a way of testing Jake's resolve. Just days before the submission deadline, his grandmother's health had taken a sudden turn for the worse. She'd been in and out of the hospital for months, but this time, the doctors had told him there was nothing more they could do. Jake had never felt more helpless in his life. His entire world was collapsing. He couldn't lose her, not now. He almost withdrew from the competition, thinking there was no point anymore. But then Tommy showed up at his door one night, shaking him out of his despair. "You're not quitting, Jake," Tommy had said firmly, pushing a can of soda into his hand. "This is for your grandmother. You've got to finish this. She's counting on you." So Jake had pushed through. He stayed up all night, coding until his eyes burned, until the coffee couldn't keep him awake anymore. His grandmother was resting in the next room, but he knew that he had to give it one last shot. This was his moment. This was his chance. He submitted the code just hours before the deadline. But he never expected what would happen next. The days after Jake submitted his project for the coding competition were a blur. He tried to focus on his grandmother, who seemed to grow weaker with each passing day, but the worry gnawed at him constantly. He had done what he could, but would it be enough? Would his late-night coding sessions, the hours spent perfecting his project, actually lead to something? Tommy called every few hours to check in. "Did you hear back from them yet?" he'd ask, his voice always full of excitement, like Jake had already won. But Jake wasn't so sure. What were the chances that a kid like him, from a broken home with no real resources, could possibly stand out among the other contestants? The other participants were from fancy schools, with access to the best technology and mentors. Jake had only his old desktop computer, his grandmother's words of encouragement, and his determination. It didn't seem like nearly enough. One afternoon, as Jake sat at the kitchen table, his grandmother's soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Jake, honey," she said, her voice weak, "don't let yourself get too lost in this. Whatever happens, know I'm proud of you. You're a good boy, and you've done your best." Jake's heart ached. He didn't want to think about losing her. Not yet. Not when he was so close to something that could change everything. But that night, the call came. It wasn't from the competition organizers. It wasn't the congratulatory call Jake had secretly hoped for. Instead, it was from the hospital. His grandmother had taken a turn for the worse. Jake's stomach twisted into a knot. He could barely understand the words the nurse was saying. Something about complications, about needing him there immediately. He grabbed his jacket and ran out the door without thinking. He had no idea if he would make it in time. The hospital room was quiet when Jake arrived, his feet heavy as he walked to his grandmother's side. Her breathing was shallow, and her frail body was surrounded by tubes and machines. She looked so small, so fragile. Jake sat next to her, clutching her hand. "I'm here, Grandma," he whispered, fighting back tears. "I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes fluttered open for a moment, and a faint smile touched her lips. "I knew you'd be here, Jake," she murmured. "You've always been my strong boy. Whatever happens, you're going to make something of yourself. Don't let go of your dreams." Jake's heart broke in two. He couldn't lose her. Not now, when everything was falling into place. But her words, her belief in him, despite everything, kept him grounded. He couldn't stop now. Not after all the effort. Not after everything they had been through together. His grandmother passed away that night, peacefully, with Jake by her side. The next day, after the funeral, Jake found himself staring at the same cracked screen of his old phone. The competition was now the last thread holding him together, a final chance at something better. But the grief was heavy, suffocating. He didn't know if he had the energy to keep going. Then came the surprise. A notification popped up on his phone, a message from an unknown number. "Jake, we've reviewed your project, and we are impressed. Please join us for an exclusive meeting with the judges. This could be the beginning of something huge. We'll be in touch soon with details." Jake stared at the message, unable to believe his eyes. Was this real? Had he actually made it through to the next round? He read it again, and again. It was real. But the joy that should have flooded him was immediately replaced with an intense anxiety. Was he ready for this? What if he didn't belong? What if the people he'd be up against were better, smarter, more experienced than he was? What if they would see him for what he really was, a kid from a small town with nothing but his dreams? Despite the fear, Jake knew one thing for sure. This was his chance. This was his moment to make something of himself. And if he was going to honor his grandmother's memory, he couldn't back down now. The internal conflict Jake faced now was more challenging than any coding problem. He had gotten this far with nothing but determination, and now he was faced with an opportunity so big, it almost scared him. He was about to step into a world that felt foreign, a world of people with resources, connections, and access to opportunities Jake could only dream of. Tommy came over later that night, as usual, to check in on Jake. The look on his face softened when he saw the message from the competition. "No way," Tommy said, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Jake, this is it. You've got a chance. You really might make it out of here." "I don't know, Tommy," Jake said, his voice uncertain. "What if they look at me and see that I don't belong?" Tommy gave him a firm look. "You belong because you've earned it. Don't doubt yourself now. You've worked harder than anyone I know. You've earned every step of this." But Jake's doubts kept creeping in. He had no mentor, no one to guide him through the process. It felt like every door he had knocked on had been slammed in his face. Every chance he had worked for had seemed just out of reach. What if this, too, was too good to be true? Jake's mind spun in 1,000 directions as he stared at the message on his phone. The words, "exclusive meeting," felt like an anchor dragging him deeper into uncertainty. This was it. The moment he had been working toward for so long. The one his grandmother had believed in. The one Tommy had pushed him toward. But as much as it felt like the beginning of something extraordinary, it also felt like the weight of his entire future was sitting on his shoulders. What if this was just another disappointment? What if they would see through him? See that he was just a kid from a broken home with no resources, no connections? But then, as if on cue, he remembered his grandmother's last words, "Don't let go of your dreams." Jake wiped his hand over his face, feeling a surge of resolve. This was his chance. He couldn't let it slip away. Not now. The next day, the details arrived. A flight ticket to California. A meeting scheduled with the panel of judges for the competition, which would be held at a tech startup hub in Silicon Valley. The excitement hit Jake in waves, but so did the fear. He'd never flown on an airplane before, never been outside of his small town. But the enormity of this opportunity overshadowed everything else. This was his shot to prove himself, to prove he was more than just the boy from the broken neighborhood. Jake spent the next few hours preparing, trying to find something to wear that would make him look presentable. It was a far cry from the fancy clothes most of the other kids would likely have, but he made do with what he had. His old, faded jeans and a button-up shirt that used to belong to his father. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind as he dressed. "You've always been my strong boy." Tommy came over to see him off. "You're really going, huh?" Tommy said, his tone a mix of pride and disbelief. "Man, I'm so proud of you. I don't even know how to explain it." Jake smiled, his nerves still getting the best of him. "I can't believe this is happening. It doesn't feel real. You've got this. Just remember, stay calm, be yourself, and don't let anyone make you feel small. You're smarter than most of them, Jake. Don't let their fancy degrees fool you." Jake chuckled, but inside, he was a storm of emotions. Fear, excitement, doubt. It felt like he was stepping into a new world, one where he wasn't sure if he belonged. The flight to California was Jake's first time on a plane. He had never seen anything like it. The city lights disappearing beneath him as the plane soared into the sky, the quiet hum of the engines, the view of the endless clouds. For a moment, it felt like the whole world was opening up to him. But then, the reality set in again. He was going to meet with some of the brightest minds in technology, some of the biggest names in the industry. He would be surrounded by kids who had access to resources he couldn't even dream of. What if he couldn't keep up? What if his old, patched-up skills weren't enough? As the plane landed, Jake's heart raced faster. He was about to step off into a world that felt entirely foreign to him. He had nothing to lose. Nothing but his dreams. The taxi ride from the airport to the tech hub in Silicon Valley was long, and Jake tried to take it all in. The gleaming buildings, the clean streets, the bustling energy. This was the epicenter of technology, where companies like Apple, Google, and Tesla were born. And now, Jake was about to be part of it. The tech hub was a futuristic building with glass walls, sleek modern furniture, and more gadgets than Jake had ever seen in his life. The space was buzzing with activity, with people in casual but impeccably stylish clothing walking by, carrying laptops, iPads, and all sorts of other high-tech devices. Jake couldn't help but feel small. He was led into a conference room where a group of judges, people from top tech companies, were waiting for him. They were all wearing business attire, sitting at a sleek, white table with laptops in front of them. They looked so professional, so important. And here he was, a kid who had spent his nights coding in a cramped room, doing his best with whatever he had. Jake Williams, one of the judges said as he stood up, offering a firm handshake. "It's a pleasure to meet you. We've been reviewing your project, and we're very impressed." Jake swallowed hard, trying to keep his composure. "Don't mess this up. Don't mess this up," he repeated to himself. "Thanks. I'm honored to be here." The judge smiled. "We can see that you've put a lot of effort into this. Your coding skills are solid, but we're also looking for creativity, innovation. Can you walk us through the thought process behind your project?" Jake's mind went blank for a moment. He could hear his grandmother's voice in his head, telling him to be brave. He took a deep breath and started speaking. "Well, my project focuses on improving accessibility in technology," he began. "I wanted to create something that could help people with disabilities interact with their devices more easily. I looked at current systems and realized that many of them still weren't intuitive enough. So I developed an app that uses voice commands to help users navigate their phones more effectively." The judges leaned in, exchanging looks. Jake continued to explain his project with as much confidence as he could muster, walking them through the code, the challenges he faced, and the unique features he had implemented. One of the judges interrupted him with a question. "What was your inspiration for this idea? It's a great concept, but what made you want to focus on accessibility?" Jake paused for a moment. It was a good question, one he hadn't really thought about before. But as he reflected, he realized that it wasn't just about making technology work better. It was about helping people, about making the world a little easier for those who often got left behind. "My grandmother," Jake said, his voice softening. "She had trouble with her vision. I remember watching her struggle to use a phone, and I wanted to make something that could help people like her. I wanted to make technology that wasn't just for the haves, but for everyone." The room went quiet for a moment, and Jake felt his heart pounding in his chest. He had said too much. Maybe he was being too emotional. But then one of the judges smiled, nodding in approval. "That's exactly what we're looking for. Someone who sees the problem and wants to fix it. That's real innovation." Jake exhaled, not even realizing he had been holding his breath. It was the first moment since arriving here that he felt like he was on the right path. Maybe, just maybe, this was where he was meant to be. Jake had barely finished his pitch when he felt the first wave of relief rush over him. He had done it. He'd gotten through the presentation. He hadn't made a fool of himself, and for a brief moment, he allowed himself to feel proud. The judges were still silent, their eyes fixed on him, but there was something different in their expressions now. It wasn't just the typical curiosity or skepticism. There was something else, a flicker of recognition. One of the judges, a tall woman in her early 40s with short, dark hair and glasses, leaned forward, a slight smile on her face. "Jake," she said, her voice calm but full of interest, "I think you've touched on something important here. Accessibility isn't just a buzzword, it's a need. And it's a need that's only going to grow. You've got potential, but I think we can help you take this project even further." Jake's heart skipped a beat. He had expected to be judged, perhaps criticized, maybe even turned away. But here they were, talking about helping him. His mind raced. What did that mean? The woman continued, "I'm going to be blunt with you, Jake. We're looking for more than just a functional app. We want to see how you can scale this idea, how you can integrate it into real-world platforms. But I can tell you that you've got the raw talent. And more importantly, you have a vision. We can help you get there." Jake's thoughts swirled. He had worked so hard to get here, and yet, in that moment, it felt like a whole new world was opening up in front of him. He had just thought about finishing the competition, maybe winning the scholarship. But this was bigger. This could be his chance to actually build something that could change lives. "Before we dive deeper," the judge continued, "we'd like to get some feedback from someone who's been where you are, someone who knows the struggles of starting from nothing." Jake blinked, confused. Who are you talking about?" The judge smiled. "You'll see in a minute. But trust me, This could be the breakthrough you've been waiting for. The door to the room opened, and in walked a tall man with a confident stride, dressed in a simple black t-shirt and jeans. Jake's first thought was that he looked like he belonged on a tech company's promotional material, cool, composed, and effortlessly stylish. He didn't expect to recognize the man, but when he caught sight of the judge's knowing smile, a strange sensation ran through him. The man walked up to Jake, extended a hand, and smiled. "Jake Williams, right? I'm Elon Musk." Jake froze. His mind went blank. Elon Musk? The Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla, SpaceX, the guy who revolutionized the electric car industry and had plans for colonizing Mars? He had seen Musk's interviews and heard his ideas, but never in a million years did Jake think he'd be standing in front of him, shaking his hand. "Yeah, that's me," Jake finally managed to stammer, his heart racing. Musk's eyes sparkled with an almost playful curiosity as he sat down across from Jake. "I've heard about your project, Jake, and I've got to say, I'm impressed. Accessibility is a cause I believe in. We're not just creating technology for the future, we're making sure that everyone, no matter their circumstances, can benefit from it." Jake's mind was still catching up, trying to process that Elon Musk was sitting right there in front of him, talking about his project. This was no longer some distant dream. It was real. Musk was interested. But Jake finally found his voice. "Why me? I mean, there are a lot of other people here who are smarter, better connected." Musk interrupted with a laugh. "You think I got where I am by playing it safe? By only betting on the obvious winners?" He leaned forward. "The truth is, Jake, people like you are the ones who change the world. You see a problem that others overlook, and you have the courage to tackle it. That's why we're interested. We want to see where this can go. And we think you have the potential to do something big." Jake's heart swelled with disbelief, excitement, and a bit of fear. Elon Musk wanted to help him. What was happening? This wasn't just an opportunity to win a competition. This was something far bigger, something he'd never dared to imagine. But there was still a part of Jake that didn't quite believe it. Could he really do this? Was he really cut out for this level of success? His mind kept coming back to the same doubts. Could someone like him, someone with no family connections, no prestigious college degree, actually build something that could change the world? Musk seemed to sense Jake's hesitation. "Let me ask you something, Jake. What would you do if you had the resources? If you had the backing, the team, the funding? What could you build?" The question hit Jake hard. It was like opening a door to a room he had never dared to enter. What would he build if he had it all? What if this was the moment when he could actually make a difference? Jake began slowly, gathering his thoughts. "I'd make sure that my app wasn't just for a small group of people. I'd make it available to everyone. I'd get it into the hands of people who need it the most, who don't have the same opportunities. I'd take it beyond phones, beyond apps. I'd create a platform that helps people with disabilities integrate into society more seamlessly. It's about accessibility, yes, but also about making sure technology helps everyone." Musk nodded approvingly, his eyes thoughtful. "I like that. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. You're on the right track, Jake, and we can help you take it further. The tech world is full of opportunities, but it's also full of people who only focus on the easy wins. What you're thinking about, that's the hard part, but it's the part that will matter in the end." Jake felt like he had just stepped into a whole new reality. The fear, the uncertainty, it was all still there, but now it was mixed with a powerful feeling of purpose. Elon Musk was right. He had a vision, and with the right resources, he could make it happen. Jake's conversation with Elon Musk changed everything. It's hard to imagine a moment like that, isn't it? The moment when someone who has already changed the world tells you that you have the power to do the same. What would you do if you were in Jake's shoes? How would you seize that opportunity? Share your thoughts below. We want to know, what's your vision for the future? The days following the meeting with Elon Musk were a blur of emotions. Jake felt like he was in a dream, moving through a world he had never imagined. One where Silicon Valley wasn't just a place on a map, but a place he now had access to. Musk had promised to help, to connect him with the resources he needed to take his project further. But what did that really mean? Jake tried to ground himself, but it was hard. One moment, he was sitting in a cramped room in his small town, trying to make sense of his code. The next, he was in a futuristic building in Silicon Valley, talking about scaling his app with one of the most influential people in the world. This wasn't real, was it? But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that it was real. He wasn't just dreaming anymore. He was part of something bigger. That afternoon, Jake received a call that would solidify the new direction his life was taking. "Jake, it's Lisa from the Musk Foundation," said the voice on the other end of the line. "I hope you're doing well. We've been discussing your project here at the foundation, and we'd like to offer you a spot in our accelerator program." Jake's heart skipped a beat. The accelerator program? This was exactly what he had hoped for when he first submitted his project to the competition. A chance to develop it with the support of professionals, mentors, and resources that would have otherwise been completely out of reach. Lisa continued, "The program will provide you with mentorship, funding, and access to some of the brightest minds in the industry. You'll be able to work with a dedicated team, build your product, and learn from people who have been where you are now. We believe in your vision, Jake. You've got what it takes." Jake barely knew what to say. His mind was racing, and his body felt like it was floating. This is real? I mean, this is happening? "Yes, it is," Lisa said with a warm laugh. "You've earned it. We'll send over the details soon, but for now, we want you to start thinking about how you'll use this opportunity. It's not just about building a product. It's about changing the world. You've already started that journey." The call ended, but Jake couldn't stop shaking. He looked out the window at the clear California sky, his hands still gripping his phone. Could this be it? Could this really be the beginning of the life he had always dreamed about? The next morning, Jake was greeted at the accelerator building with an enthusiasm that matched the excitement in his chest. The space was designed like a tech incubator out of a sci-fi movie. Open workspaces, glass-walled meeting rooms, and walls covered in digital displays of data and charts. It was a far cry from his grandmother's kitchen, where he had started coding just months before. Jake, right? A man in his late 30s, dressed casually in a hoodie and jeans, approached him. "I'm Marcus, your lead mentor. Welcome to the accelerator. We're excited to have you on board." Jake shook his hand, still trying to grasp the magnitude of the situation. "Thanks, Marcus. I'm really excited to be here." Marcus smiled. "You should be. This is a big step, and we're going to push you. But I can see you've got the drive to make it happen." As Marcus led Jake through the space, introducing him to the team, Jake felt the weight of the moment. He was surrounded by young tech professionals, many of whom had come from prestigious universities, others who had already built successful startups. It was intimidating, to say the least. But there was also something else, an energy, a sense of possibility. They weren't just here to work on their own projects. They were here to help each other, to learn from each other. The idea of collaboration was emphasized repeatedly. "The goal here isn't just to make money," Marcus explained. "It's to build something that matters, something that will last." Jake could feel the pressure mounting. What if I can't do it? He thought. What if I'm just not cut out for this world? That afternoon, Marcus introduced Jake to his mentor team, a group of tech experts, engineers, and even a few product designers who would help him refine his idea and turn it into something market-ready. It was overwhelming. These were people who had built real companies, had shaped the products Jake had only dreamed about, and now they were going to help him. One of the mentors, a woman named Sophia, asked Jake to explain his project in more detail. Jake took a deep breath and began to speak. He talked about his app, the features he had built, the vision of making technology more accessible for people with disabilities. The team listened closely, nodding in understanding as Jake described how he wanted to create a platform that was not only user-friendly, but also deeply personalized for people with different needs. Sophia was the first to speak up when he finished. "Jake, I think you're onto something here. But we need to think bigger. We need to push the boundaries. How can we integrate this with other tech? How can we make sure this platform isn't just for one type of user, but for everyone who needs it?" Jake nodded, his mind spinning with ideas. What if he could build partnerships with other tech companies? What if he could make his app work with smart home devices, or even with AI-powered assistants? The possibilities were endless, but it was also a lot to process. "That's the next step, Jake," Sophia said, clearly impressed. "We'll help you map out how to scale this. You've got a great idea, But now we need to think about how it fits into the bigger picture of accessibility in the tech world. As Jake dove deeper into his project, he started to feel a growing sense of doubt. Every day, he was surrounded by brilliant people, each with their own expertise, their own impressive portfolios. And as much as they were supportive, he couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't belong. One afternoon, while working late in one of the collaborative spaces, Jake overheard a conversation between two other accelerator participants. They were discussing a startup they had launched together, one that was already attracting investors and building buzz in the tech media. "I heard they're talking about a partnership with Google," one of them said. "This could really take us to the next level." Jake felt a knot form in his stomach. Google? He barely had the words to describe his app. And these guys were already talking about partnering with one of the biggest tech companies in the world? The gap between where they were and where he was felt impossibly wide. He tried to shake off the thought, but it lingered, eating away at him. Was he really ready for this? Just then, Marcus walked over to him. He must have noticed the look on Jake's face. "You good?" he asked gently. "You seem a little off." Jake hesitated, then nodded. I'm trying to keep up. Everyone here seems like they're light years ahead of me. I don't know if I can do it." Marcus smiled, sitting down beside him. "Jake, you're here because you have something that they don't. You've got the heart. You've got the vision. Don't let what others are doing throw you off track. This is your journey. Everyone here has their own path." Jake's heart lifted a little. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe this wasn't about comparing himself to others. Maybe it was about focusing on what he could do. Jake had spent the last few weeks at the accelerator program immersed in his work. The initial excitement had faded into the kind of intensity that made him feel both exhilarated and exhausted at once. Each day, he woke up earlier than the last, stayed at the office later than he should, and pushed himself harder than he ever had before. Yet, despite the long hours and the overwhelming nature of it all, he felt a deep sense of purpose. His dream was no longer just a fantasy. It was becoming real. But there was still a mountain of obstacles ahead of him. Each time he thought he had made progress on his app, something new would crop up. A feature wasn't working as expected, a new bug would emerge, or the team would question his next step. It was the kind of iterative process that felt like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The doubts, too, continued to plague him. It wasn't just the comparison to his fellow participants, although that certainly didn't help. It was the fact that Jake had always been an outsider in the tech world. He was self-taught, coming from a small town, with little to no formal training. He had always been an underdog, someone who was told that success was for the privileged, the well-connected, the lucky. And yet, here he was, surrounded by people who had the education, the experience, and the network to get ahead. Still, he kept going. What else could he do? He had a chance now. An opportunity that so many people would kill for, and he wasn't about to waste it. One day, Jake's breakthrough came unexpectedly, in a conversation with Sophia, the product designer who had become one of his most trusted mentors. They were sitting in a collaborative space, reviewing the app's interface, discussing potential user experiences. The app, at this point, had evolved significantly. It had moved from a basic concept to a more sophisticated design, and the features were beginning to align with Jake's vision. But something was still missing. The feedback from the test users wasn't as positive as he'd hoped. Sophia took a deep breath and sat back in her chair. "Jake, you're doing everything by the book. You've got all the right features, the right tools, and the right mindset. But you're not seeing the bigger picture." Jake frowned. "What do you mean? Isn't that the goal? To create something that works? A functional product?" Sophia shook her head. "It's not just about functionality. It's about creating something that changes lives. You're focused on solving technical problems, but you need to think about the emotional impact of what you're building." Jake blinked. Emotional impact? Isn't that a bit much? I mean, we're talking about accessibility. The goal is just to make it easier for people to use tech, right? Sophia smiled. "Yes, but what if you could do more than that? What if you could make people feel empowered, not just included? You need to understand your users on a deeper level, beyond just their needs. What motivates them? What excites them? What do they struggle with emotionally, not just practically?" It took Jake a moment to process her words. He had been so focused on the technical side on building a product that worked, that he hadn't fully considered the human aspect of his app. His users weren't just looking for accessibility, they were looking for dignity, respect, and a sense of belonging in the tech world. Think about it, Sophia continued. If we can help people feel like they belong, like they're not just using an assistive tool but are a part of the tech revolution, that will make all the difference. It's not just about solving a problem. It's about changing their lives in a way that makes them feel seen and heard. Jake sat back, suddenly overwhelmed by the weight of her words. He had been so caught up in the technical aspects that he had almost forgotten why he was doing this in the first place. This wasn't just a project. It was an opportunity to change the narrative for people with disabilities. It wasn't enough to just make technology easier to use. He had to make people feel powerful, capable, and, above all, valued. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Jake started reworking the app's features, taking Sophia's advice to heart. He began designing not just for accessibility, but for a deeper, more profound experience. It wasn't enough for his app to just work. It had to empower its users. Jake also realized that he needed to redefine the way he was approaching his users. They weren't just people with disabilities. They were individuals with unique experiences and abilities. He began to focus more on the personalization aspect, customizing the interface based on a user's specific needs and preferences, giving them more control over the tech they used. As Jake began to revise the design, the pieces of his project started falling into place. He could feel the vision coming to life in a way that he hadn't expected. This wasn't just an app for people with disabilities. It was a movement to create a new space in the tech world for people who had long been overlooked. One evening, after hours of work, Jake finally sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. For the first time since he had started this journey, he felt a deep sense of accomplishment. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but he could see it now. He had a vision. And more importantly, he had a way forward. It was that night, as Jake was finishing up his work, that he got another call. "Jake," Marcus said on the other end, "I've got some good news. Elon Musk wants to see your updated prototype. He's been following your progress, and he's interested in seeing how you've implemented the changes we discussed." Jake's heart raced. "Elon Musk wanted to see my app? Can you present it tomorrow?" Marcus asked. Jake barely had time to process the question before he answered. "Yes, I'll be ready." The next morning, Jake stood in front of Elon Musk, along with Sophia and Marcus. They were in one of the private meeting rooms, the walls lined with screens displaying data and diagrams. Jake had been working non-stop for the past few days, tweaking the app, making adjustments, and rethinking how to present it. Now, it was time to show Musk what he had done. "Jake," Elon said, as he leaned back in his chair, "I've seen your progress. Let's see how far you've come." Jake took a deep breath, wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans, and began. He explained the updates he had made, how he had focused on the emotional impact of the app, how he had created a more personalized, user-friendly experience. He showed Musk the new features, including the way users could customize their profiles, adjust accessibility settings, and interact with the tech in ways that felt natural. As he finished, there was a long pause. Jake held his breath, his heart thundering in his chest. Finally, Elon spoke. "This is incredible, Jake," he said, his voice calm but impressed. "You've done something special here. It's more than just an app. You're creating something that matters. You found a way to take your vision and turn it into something real. This is exactly the kind of thinking we need in the world of technology." Jake could barely believe it. Elon Musk was impressed. "I'm excited to see where this goes, Jake," Musk continued. "We're going to make sure you have the support you need to scale this. You're on the right track." Jake felt like he was walking on air after Elon Musk's approval. It was a surreal moment, but also a weighty one. Elon hadn't just acknowledged Jake's app. He had seen the bigger picture, the emotional impact, the potential to change lives. Jake had worked hard to get to this point, but this new feedback wasn't just praise. It was a challenge. As the accelerator program continued, Jake found himself staring at his prototype, wondering how he could possibly meet the expectations that had now been set. Yes, Musk had been impressed, but the next steps were critical. There was no room for mediocrity. If anything, Jake's vision for the app had only grown, but so had the pressure to make it not just good, but revolutionary. He was sitting at a conference table with Marcus and Sophia, reviewing the next steps. The team had already started to line up meetings with potential investors, tech partners, and influencers to help spread the word. But despite all the excitement, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something crucial was missing. "You've got this, Jake," Marcus said, breaking him from his thoughts. "But you're going to need to take it to the next level. The emotional engagement, what we've talked about, is key, but we need a broader reach. You have to think big." Jake sighed and ran his hand through his hair. "I know, but there's so much pressure. It's not just about the app anymore. It's about changing the way people view technology and accessibility. And I'm just one person. What if I can't pull it off?" Sophia leaned forward. "Jake, you're not alone in this. You've got us. And more importantly, you've got your story. Your passion is what makes this work. People will rally behind that." But even as she said those words, Jake couldn't help but feel like the stakes were much higher than he had imagined. He wasn't just building an app. He was aiming to change the tech world, to create something that bridged the gap between innovation and accessibility. It was no longer a side project. It was a movement. It was that same evening when Jake encountered the first major roadblock that would test both his resolve and the future of his app. As he sat at his laptop, running through some final adjustments to his prototype, he noticed something strange. One of the core features, the real-time speech-to-text translation, was glitching. It had worked perfectly in initial tests. But now, when users spoke, the app misinterpreted almost every sentence. Words were jumbled. Sentences were garbled. What was supposed to be a revolutionary feature that would bridge the gap between people with speech disabilities and technology had suddenly turned into a frustration. Jake's heart sank. He had worked so hard on this feature. He had spent weeks researching algorithms, testing different voice recognition models, and making sure the app was as intuitive as possible. And now, it wasn't working. How could I let this happen? He immediately opened the code and started debugging, his fingers flying over the keyboard, searching for the issue. Hours passed, and by the time Sophia walked in to check on him, Jake was exhausted, staring at the same frustrating error message. "I can't figure it out," Jake muttered, rubbing his eyes. "This feature, it was working fine. What's going wrong?" Sophia glanced at the screen, her brow furrowing. "It's a bug, but it's more than that. The feature is good, Jake. But if you're going to launch this to the world, you can't afford even a small glitch. You need this to work seamlessly, especially for people who rely on it. Anything less isn't an option." Jake's frustration flared. "I know, but I don't know what's causing it. It's like the whole algorithm is breaking down, and I don't have the time or the resources to fix it." Sophia paused for a moment before speaking. "Have you thought about getting outside help? There are experts who specialize in this kind of problem. Speech-to-text AI is complicated. Maybe it's time to bring in a specialist." Jake stared at the screen, the realization sinking in. Outside help. He had been so focused on doing everything himself, building the app from the ground up, that he had forgotten one of the key principles of entrepreneurship. You can't do it all alone. The next morning, Jake made a difficult decision. He reached out to a company that specialized in AI-driven voice recognition. It wasn't an easy call to make. He had always prided himself on doing things independently, on proving he could create something great without relying on anyone else. But this was different. He couldn't afford to let his pride get in the way of progress. The company, known as Voice Labs, responded quickly, offering to send over one of their engineers for a consultation. They assured Jake that their expertise could help him refine the speech-to-text feature and get it working as flawlessly as possible. The following week, a specialist named Ethan arrived at the accelerator to work with Jake. Ethan was an expert in natural language processing and speech recognition, and after reviewing Jake's code, he immediately identified several issues with the way the app was interpreting audio data. "I see what you're trying to do here, Jake," Ethan said, as he walked Jake through the problem. "Your algorithm is solid, but it's missing a critical layer for contextual understanding. You're focusing on individual words, but you need to teach the system to understand the flow of conversation." Jake listened intently as Ethan explained the changes they needed to make. It was complicated stuff, overhauling the app's AI layer to ensure it could handle natural speech patterns, even when sentences were fragmented or imprecise. But Ethan's confidence gave Jake a new sense of hope. I think with these adjustments, Ethan continued, we can get this feature to a point where it'll truly meet the needs of your users. But it's going to take some time, and it's going to require patience. Jake nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. This was the challenge he had been avoiding. The realization that he couldn't do it all himself, but it was also the lesson he needed to learn. No one can go it alone forever. With the plan set in motion to fix the speech-to-text feature, Jake refocused his energy on the bigger picture. He had made progress, and while it wasn't perfect, he knew the app had the potential to be something truly special. He couldn't afford to get bogged down in perfectionism, not when there was still so much work to do. Jake called a meeting with his team, Marcus, Sophia, and the other accelerator participants. He laid out the situation, the speech-to-text issue, the potential delay in the launch, and the adjustments that were necessary. But more than that, he shared the lesson he had learned over the past few weeks. I can't do it all myself, Jake admitted, looking at the team. I've been so focused on building this app solo that I forgot something important. This is a team effort. We're all in this together, and I need your help to get it over the finish line. There was a pause, but then Marcus smiled and clapped Jake on the back. That's the right mindset, Jake. We've got your back. Let's finish this thing together. Sophia added, you've already come so far. Don't let this setback stop you. It's just part of the process. Jake looked around the room, seeing the same sense of determination reflected in their eyes. For the first time in weeks, the weight on his shoulders felt a little lighter. He wasn't alone anymore. Jake's team was fired up. It had been weeks since that breakthrough moment, the one where they decided to face the challenges together instead of doing everything on their own. The first hurdle, the speech-to-text feature, had been solved with the help of voice labs, and with each passing day, they grew more confident in the potential of their app. However, as they entered the final stretch of the accelerator program, the reality of scaling the project was sinking in. The app was ready for its first public demo. The investors were lined up, the press was waiting, and Jake's heart was beating faster than it ever had before. This wasn't just a test for the app. This was the moment that would determine the future of his startup. But as much as he had hoped the path would be clear, obstacles kept emerging. The financial projections weren't aligning with the vision he had in mind. The team was still working long hours, some feeling the weight of the pressure, others battling the nagging self-doubt that lingered in the background. Jake knew he needed a game-changing moment, something that would propel the app beyond its current limits. It wasn't enough to have a functioning product. He needed to spark a larger movement, and he wasn't sure how to do it yet. It was a Thursday morning when Jake's phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. The name on the screen made his stomach drop. Marcus. Jake, we've got some exciting news, Marcus said, his voice full of energy. Elon Musk wants to meet with you again. He's been following your progress, and he's got some big ideas about where to take your project next. He's offering to help you scale faster. He wants to bring Tesla into the mix. Jake felt his heart race. Tesla? This was bigger than anything he had imagined. The idea of partnering with Tesla meant incredible resources, visibility, and an unparalleled level of expertise. Tesla? As in, the car company? What are you talking about? Jake stammered, his voice barely able to catch up with his thoughts. Yes, Tesla. Elon's interested in how your app can work with their in-car technology. He sees the potential to integrate accessibility tools directly into Tesla's vehicle systems. Think about it. Real-time speech-to-text in cars for people with disabilities. This could change everything. Jake was silent for a moment, stunned by the enormity of the opportunity. This wasn't just about launching a successful app. It was about revolutionizing how people with disabilities could interact with the world around them. The potential was staggering. Jake, we need to make this happen. This meeting could be the tipping point you've been looking for. But you've got to bring your A game. We need to show them that you're not just a small startup. You're a company with a vision to change the way people experience technology, Marcus continued. Jake took a deep breath. This was his moment. All right, I'll be ready. In the days leading up to the meeting with Elon, Jake didn't sleep much. There was too much at stake. He worked late into the night with Sophia and Marcus, revising their pitch and ensuring the app's features were polished and ready to impress. They knew that this meeting wasn't just about presenting an idea. It was about demonstrating that the vision for the app aligned with Tesla's forward-thinking philosophy. Sophia and Jake spent hours fine-tuning the design, emphasizing how the app could integrate seamlessly with Tesla's advanced in-car interface. They worked to ensure that the app would provide real-time feedback, not just for people with speech disabilities, but for anyone who needed an accessibility boost on the road. By the time they were done, Jake felt more confident than he ever had. Marcus worked on their financials, preparing a pitch deck that showed exactly how the partnership could work, how Tesla's integration could lead to massive user growth, how the combined platforms could open up new markets, and, of course, the undeniable social impact of making technology more accessible for people with disabilities. The night before the meeting, Jake sat alone in the office, looking over everything one last time. He wasn't just presenting a business anymore. He was presenting a movement, a revolution in how tech could be used to level the playing field for all users. The meeting was held at Tesla's headquarters, a sleek, futuristic building that exuded innovation from every corner. Jake felt small as he entered the conference room, surrounded by some of the most brilliant minds in technology. But he was determined not to let nerves take over. This was the opportunity he had dreamed about, and if he was going to make it, he had to prove that he could stand toe-to-toe with these giants. When Elon Musk walked into the room, Jake's breath caught in his throat. The man who had been an inspiration, a mentor from afar, was now standing in front of him, smiling. "Jake, good to finally meet you in person," Elon said, extending a hand. "I've heard great things about your work." Jake shook his hand, his voice steady. "Thank you, Elon. I'm honored to be here." Elon sat down at the head of the table, looking over the pitch deck. "Let's get to it. I've been following your progress, and I think you've got something special here. Your app could change lives, not just for people with disabilities, but for the entire way we think about accessibility in tech. Integrating it with Tesla could be a game changer." Jake's pulse quickened. This was exactly the validation he had been hoping for. "That's exactly what we're hoping for, Elon. We believe this app can help bridge the gap between innovation and accessibility. If we work together, we can build a system that doesn't just cater to a niche, it can transform the mainstream." Elon nodded, his mind working at full speed. "I think you're right. The potential here is huge. But we need to take this further. We can't just create another accessibility tool. We need to create a truly integrated experience for people. We want your app to become a part of the Tesla ecosystem, a seamless experience for users, whether they're in a car or at home." Jake's mind raced as Elon outlined the vision. He could see it now. His app, integrated into every Tesla, helping people with disabilities navigate the world in a way that was more intuitive than ever before. It was more than just a product. It was a complete rethinking of what technology could be. "We're ready to move forward," Elon said, with a decisive tone. "We'll have our engineers start working with yours. Let's make this happen." Jake sat back, overwhelmed with excitement. This was it. He had done it. The dream he had worked so hard to realize was now a reality. As Jake and his team left Tesla's headquarters, the weight of what had just transpired settled in. They had just secured a partnership with one of the most forward-thinking companies in the world. Tesla's involvement would not only take the app to a global scale, it would also validate the importance of accessibility in technology in a way that no one could ignore. But Jake knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long, and the challenges would continue to mount. But with the backing of Tesla, and with the lessons he had learned so far, he felt more ready than ever to take on whatever came next. Jake looked over at Sophia and Marcus as they walked out to the parking lot. They exchanged knowing smiles. They had made it this far together. "We did it," Jake said, finally allowing himself a moment of relief. Sophia grinned. "This is just the start. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but if we can keep this momentum, we're going to change the world." After the meeting with Elon Musk, Jake and his team were on cloud nine. The partnership with Tesla was a game changer, but as the dust settled, they realized just how much work lay ahead. This wasn't just about building an app anymore. It was about scaling that app to meet the demands of a global audience, integrating it into a massive tech ecosystem, and ensuring it was accessible, functional, and life-changing for people who needed it the most. It was time to level up. The first few days after the Tesla meeting were a blur. Jake and the team were inundated with calls from Tesla engineers, legal teams, and marketing professionals, all eager to start working on the integration. The app was being primed for launch on Tesla's vehicle systems, but the reality of what that entailed began to hit Jake hard. He had been so focused on getting the app ready for the Tesla meeting that he hadn't fully prepared for the overwhelming scope of what the collaboration required. "You ready for this?" Marcus asked one morning as they sat in the office, looking over a mountain of emails. The project had gone from a small startup operation to a massive, cross-company initiative in the span of a few days. Jake leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. "I think so. It's just, there's so much. We're not just tweaking an app now. We're essentially building a new infrastructure." Marcus nodded. "The pressure's on, but this is the kind of opportunity you don't get twice. We've got to hit the ground running." Sophia joined the conversation, bringing a fresh perspective. "We knew scaling would be tough, Jake, but we've got the best team behind us. This isn't just about coding anymore. It's about user experience, data security, legal compliance, and making sure we can support millions of users at once. It's all about building a system that works, not just a product." Jake knew she was right. They had reached the point where they couldn't afford to cut corners. With Tesla's backing, the app would soon be introduced to millions of users. It would be integrated into Tesla vehicles across the globe. This wasn't just a business launch. This was a movement. But how could they manage the weight of it all? As Jake and the team dove headfirst into development, things moved quickly, but not without bumps along the way. One of the first major issues they encountered was related to the integration of the app with Tesla's in-car system. The idea was simple in theory. The app would allow users to activate real-time speech-to-text features while driving, assisting those with speech disabilities. But as they worked with Tesla's engineers to integrate the app into the car's dashboard, they realized that the system was more complex than they had anticipated. Tesla's in-car system was built around a highly sophisticated AI that already handled navigation, media, and voice commands. Integrating an entirely new feature without disrupting the delicate balance of the Tesla ecosystem was proving to be a monumental task. "I don't understand," Jake said, looking over the code one night. "We've been testing this feature for months, but it's not working the way it should in the car's system. The speech-to-text is lagging, and the app is freezing at random intervals." Sophia looked over his shoulder, furrowing her brow. "It's definitely an issue with the connection to the Tesla OS. The system isn't recognizing the app's input correctly. It's not syncing with the vehicle's other AI functions. If this continues, we'll miss the launch window." Marcus, who had been on a conference call with Tesla engineers, walked into the room, his face tense. "I've got bad news. Tesla's team says we need to do a complete overhaul of our integration process. They're suggesting we rethink the way we're connecting the app to the car's AI." Jake's stomach dropped. This was a critical issue. The launch was just weeks away, and now they had to redo key aspects of the project. The pressure was building, and it felt like the world was closing in on him. Jake's frustration was palpable, but he knew he couldn't give up now. After spending the entire weekend trying to troubleshoot the issues, he called a meeting with his core team. "We need a new plan," Jake said, his voice steady despite the growing pressure. "We can't just keep pushing through this without addressing the core problem. The Tesla system is way more complex than we thought, but that doesn't mean we throw in the towel. We have to rethink how we're approaching the integration. We can't afford any more mistakes." Sophia nodded, her mind already working through potential solutions. "What if we go back to the drawing board and create a simpler interface for the Tesla system to start with? Instead of trying to integrate all the features at once, we break it down into smaller chunks. We can test each part individually and make sure everything works before we move on to the next piece." Marcus added, "We could also reach out to the Tesla engineers again and ask for more specific guidance. We need them to help us optimize the connection, or we might never get this to work." Jake took a deep breath, feeling a renewed sense of clarity. This wasn't a setback. It was an opportunity to refine their approach and ensure the app would be as strong as possible before launch. "All right, let's focus on the basics first. We'll scale down the initial integration, but we make sure it's rock solid. Once we've got that, we can scale up and add more features. I'll reach out to Tesla again and set up a meeting. We're not backing down from this." In the weeks that followed, Jake and his team focused on rebuilding the integration process from the ground up. Instead of trying to integrate the app into the entire Tesla system at once, they broke it into smaller, manageable parts. They focused on the speech-to-text functionality first, ensuring it could perform reliably in a car setting without any glitches or lag. Tesla's engineers, while initially skeptical of the new approach, were impressed by the team's persistence and willingness to collaborate. They worked closely with Jake's team, providing insights into how Tesla's AI could be optimized for their app, helping them get over technical hurdles they had previously thought insurmountable. Finally, after weeks of late nights and debugging, the first successful integration test was completed. The app worked flawlessly within the car's interface, accurately converting speech into text in real time, even while the car was in motion. Jake sat back in his chair, staring at the screen with a mixture of relief and disbelief. They had done it. The app was ready to be integrated fully into the Tesla ecosystem. With the first major hurdle behind them, Jake felt a renewed sense of determination. The work wasn't over, but the app was now in a position to change lives in ways they hadn't imagined just a few months ago. Tesla had given them the resources they needed to scale, and with the technology working seamlessly, it was time to shift gears. The app would soon be deployed to Tesla vehicles across the globe, reaching millions of people. But the next phase of the journey was just beginning, expanding the reach and impact of the app. Scaling a vision to a global level isn't easy. There are setbacks, challenges, and moments when everything seems to be falling apart. But with each obstacle, there is an opportunity to learn, refine, and strengthen the foundation of your mission. For Jake and his team, it was clear. The road to success was never linear, but they were on the right path. Have you ever faced a situation where everything seemed to fall apart, only for you to rise again stronger than before? How did you overcome the obstacles? Share your experience in the comments. Let's discuss how we can all keep pushing forward, no matter what. As the app began to integrate smoothly into Tesla's ecosystem, Jake's team entered a new phase of their journey. They had overcome some of the toughest technical challenges, but now they were about to face a whole new beast: public scrutiny. The partnership with Tesla meant that the app was no longer just a promising startup, it was a global sensation. Media outlets, influencers, and journalists were clamoring to get a piece of the story. The stakes had never been higher. It was a Wednesday morning when Jake's phone started ringing off the hook. The headlines were already rolling in. Tesla partners with startup to revolutionize accessibility for drivers with disabilities. Game changer. How one app is transforming the in-car experience. Jake could barely keep up with the influx of calls from journalists, bloggers, and TV producers. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. His inbox was flooded with interview requests, press releases, and social media tags. At first, he felt elated. This was the kind of exposure they had worked so hard for. But as the days went by, Jake began to feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. The pressure to perform was palpable. He wasn't just managing an app anymore. He was managing a public image. Marcus, always calm under pressure, looked at Jake one day and said, "This is just the beginning. You can't do this alone. You need to start delegating. We have to handle this the right way." Jake knew Marcus was right. The media was relentless, and their story was going to attract both praise and criticism. How could they ensure the story was told the way they wanted? And more importantly, how could they make sure the app continued to deliver the value they promised? A few days later, Jake found himself standing on stage at a press event hosted by Tesla. It was a sleek, high-tech venue, filled with journalists and key influencers in the tech and disability advocacy spaces. On the large screen behind him, images of the app in action were being projected. People using the app in Tesla vehicles, converting speech to text in real time, driving with more independence. Jake could feel the sweat gathering on his palms as he took his place at the podium. The pressure to not only showcase the app, but also to represent the mission of the company in front of such an influential crowd was overwhelming. Sophia stood in the wings, offering him a reassuring smile. "You've got this," she whispered, though Jake could tell she was just as nervous as he was. As the event kicked off, Jake launched into his speech, explaining the mission behind the app, its impact on accessibility, and the seamless integration with Tesla. The media seemed to eat it up. Jake could see them typing furiously on their laptops, scribbling down notes, eager to get the story out. He felt the tide of excitement building. But it wasn't just the journalists Jake was worried about. He knew that with great success came even greater expectations. What if the app didn't work perfectly in every situation? What if users found bugs? What if the media turned on them, questioning the app's reliability? The moment of truth came when one of the journalists raised their hand. This is a great innovation, Jake. But how can you guarantee that the app will perform consistently across all Tesla models, especially with so many different tech systems out there? Jake took a breath, knowing this was the moment to stand tall. We've tested the app extensively, and Tesla has been an incredible partner in ensuring seamless integration with all their vehicles. We're committed to continuous improvement, and if any issues arise, we'll address them immediately. Our goal is to provide a tool that truly improves the driving experience for people with disabilities, and we're dedicated to making that happen. The journalist nodded, but Jake could see the skepticism lingering. The spotlight was intense. One misstep could derail months of hard work. Just as things seemed to be going smoothly, something unexpected happened. A group of critics began to question the app's effectiveness. Some disabled advocates felt that while the app was a step in the right direction, it didn't go far enough in meeting the needs of the community. They argued that it was just a band-aid solution rather than a true breakthrough. Why isn't it making more radical changes? Why isn't it fully customizable for all types of disabilities? One prominent activist wrote in a blog post. Jake was taken aback. He had expected some level of criticism. After all, innovation rarely comes without resistance, but the intensity of the backlash left him unsettled. He had poured his heart into this app, and now people were questioning its very foundation. It stung. The team gathered at the office to discuss the backlash. Sophia spoke first, her voice steady but firm. We knew going in that we wouldn't please everyone, but what we're doing is important, and we've already made a massive impact. We can't let these voices distract us from our vision. Marcus nodded. It's not about perfection, Jake. It's about progress, and we've come a long way. Let's focus on the people who are benefiting from this, because they're the ones that matter most. Jake felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He knew Marcus was right. They couldn't let criticism derail their progress. But he also realized they needed to listen and adapt. If there were improvements to be made, they had to be open to feedback. It was part of the process. As the weeks passed, the app continued to gain traction. Despite the criticism, the app was making a tangible difference in people's lives. The positive stories flooded in. A mother of a child with a speech disability praised the app for helping her son communicate more effectively in the car. A retired veteran with hearing loss shared how the app allowed him to better understand his Tesla's navigation system without needing to pull over and adjust settings manually. These were the stories that fueled Jake's fire. The app wasn't perfect, but it was already changing lives. And with Tesla's backing, the scale of that impact was only going to grow. Still, Jake knew there was more work to be done. They needed to keep pushing forward, innovating, improving, and ensuring that the app would meet the needs of a diverse range of users. They had a responsibility to ensure that accessibility didn't just stay as an afterthought in the tech world, but became a core principle of innovation. As Jake's app continued to grow and gain traction, the team started to notice something they hadn't anticipated: competitors. The success of the app had sparked the interest of other tech companies, including some of the world's biggest names in accessibility and automotive technology. Jake's dream, which had started out as a small, unique solution, was now in the sights of larger corporations with more resources, more funding, and teams of experts. The competition was fierce, and the pressure to stay ahead of the curve was mounting. It began with a seemingly innocent meeting with an investor who had shown interest in their project early on. His words were casual, but the underlying tone was clear. There were new players entering the field. "You've got something incredible here, Jake," the investor said over lunch, flipping through a few notes on his tablet. "But have you seen what Apple's doing? They just announced their own accessibility initiative in collaboration with some car manufacturers. Word is, they've already partnered with a few automakers for integration into their vehicles." Jake's heart sank. Apple. The company had deep pockets, a brand people trusted, and an ecosystem that was almost impossible to break into. They had the resources to replicate what Jake and his team had worked so hard for, if not improve it. "What do you think that means for us?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The investor leaned back. "It's a game changer. You'll need to move fast. Big companies don't like to lose market share. And when they decide to take something seriously, they have the infrastructure to dominate. It wasn't long before Jake started seeing the first signs of real competition. Articles began popping up about tech giants like Google and Apple launching their own accessibility apps, designed to serve the same market. These new apps promised similar features: real-time speech-to-text in vehicles, enhanced accessibility options, and seamless integrations with existing in-car systems. Jake had always known that tech would be a competitive field, but he hadn't realized just how quickly the landscape could change. He couldn't help but feel a wave of panic wash over him. How could they possibly compete with companies like Google and Apple, with their seemingly unlimited resources? "Jake, we have to do something," Sophia said one afternoon, reading an article about Apple's new initiative. "If they really start pushing this, we could be out of business in a matter of months." Marcus had a more pragmatic view. "We've been building something unique. They're going to have the money and power to replicate parts of our app, but they can't copy our mission. They can't copy the stories we've heard from users who rely on us. Our real strength is in the impact we've made." Jake nodded slowly, but the fear was still there. How much longer could they ride on the novelty of their idea before the giants took over? As the competition intensified, Jake realized something fundamental. They couldn't outspend or out-advertise companies like Apple. They couldn't compete on resources. But what they had to do was innovate. "I'm not going to let this happen," Jake said one morning to his team, after spending hours pacing around the office. "If we want to stay ahead, we need to think bigger. What does the future look like? How can we take our app to the next level? We need to be so far ahead of the curve that no one can catch up." Sophia, who had been quiet for a while, finally spoke up. "We've always said that accessibility isn't just about speech-to-text. We've been talking about expanding the app's capabilities for months. What if we push the boundaries of what it can do? We need to create something that's not just a tool, but a platform." Marcus leaned in, intrigued. "A platform?" Sophia nodded. "What if we made the app capable of more than just accessibility? What if it became a hub for all kinds of personalized in-car services? A one-stop shop for everything someone might need in a vehicle: accessibility, safety, convenience, real-time updates, integration with other smart devices." The possibilities are endless. Jake's heart started to race. This was it. This was the breakthrough idea they needed. But it would take everything they had: innovation, time, and resources. Could they do it? The team quickly got to work. They weren't just building an app anymore. They were creating a platform. A platform that could adapt to anyone's needs, from the most basic functions to the most complex. They expanded the app's features to include real-time navigation updates for people with vision impairments, hands-free control for those with mobility challenges, and personalized alerts for hearing-impaired users. But it didn't stop there. They also integrated a system that allowed users to control in-car settings via voice, including climate control, music, and even seat adjustments. They began to develop partnerships with healthcare providers, so the app could sync with medical devices, helping users with chronic conditions monitor their health while on the road. The team worked around the clock, pushing themselves harder than ever before. With the looming threat of competition, there was no time to waste. As the weeks passed, the new platform began to take shape. They ran internal tests, ensuring that every feature worked seamlessly across all Tesla models. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. "I've never seen anything like this before," Marcus said after one of the trial runs. "It's not just an app, it's a whole system. People are going to love it." But Jake knew that internal tests were just the beginning. The real challenge would come when the app was rolled out to the public. They needed feedback from real users, people who would push the platform to its limits. That's when they decided to conduct a public beta, releasing the new platform to a select group of Tesla owners with disabilities. The response was immediate and intense. Some were thrilled with the new features, calling it the most revolutionary change they'd seen in accessibility technology. Others found bugs, glitches, and problems they hadn't anticipated. Jake and his team dove into fixing the issues, working tirelessly to address every piece of feedback. The pressure was mounting, but they were determined to get it right. The big day arrived. The new platform was ready for a full launch. Jake stood in front of his computer, watching the final reports come in as the app went live on Tesla's systems. There was no turning back now. "Here we go," Sophia said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake watched as the first wave of users began to download the update. The app was live. It was no longer just a solution for one problem. It was a multifaceted, adaptive platform that could transform how people interacted with their cars. For the first time in a long time, Jake felt a sense of peace. They had taken on the giants, and they had come out swinging. No matter how hard the competition tried, they now had something that couldn't be easily replicated. A vision for the future, built on the foundation of real-world impact. The moment of triumph from the new platform's launch was fleeting. For Jake and his team, the excitement of rolling out their groundbreaking update was quickly overshadowed by a harsh reality. The competition wasn't waiting. While they had innovated, the tech giants weren't sitting idle. Google, Apple, and others had started to roll out more aggressive marketing campaigns and ramped up their own accessibility features. The floodgates had opened, and now, it was a race to stay relevant. Jake sat in the conference room with Sophia, Marcus, and the rest of the team, his mind heavy. Every day, new competitors were announcing partnerships, releases, and updates. Even Tesla, the company that had supported them from the beginning, was now talking about their own in-house accessibility features for their vehicles. Was it possible that Tesla itself might start developing its own competing platform? It's getting overwhelming, Jake admitted, rubbing his eyes. The noise is growing, and we're being drowned out. Sophia tapped her pen on the table, deep in thought. We have to remember why we're here. It's not just about the tech. It's about the people. We've made a real difference for so many individuals, people with disabilities who are now more independent, more connected. But if we're going to keep growing, we need a way to cut through all this noise. Marcus was quick to offer a solution. We've always been more than just an app. Our story, the impact we've had, that's what people care about. Let's reframe the conversation. Instead of focusing on features, let's focus on what we're doing. The human side of the story. We need to bring the narrative back to the people we're helping. Jake felt a glimmer of hope. Marcus was right. They had been so focused on keeping up with the competition that they had lost sight of the bigger picture. The real lives they had changed. It was time to put the people they helped back at the forefront of their mission. Jake decided to take the advice to heart. He and Sophia began brainstorming ways to shift the narrative, to remind the world that this wasn't just another tech startup. It was a movement to make the world more accessible. They wanted to create a campaign that wasn't just about their app, but about the people who depended on it. A few days later, the team rolled out their new campaign, titled Real Lives, Real Change. Instead of focusing on the technical aspects of the app or comparing it to competitors, they began sharing real stories from users who had benefited from the platform. The stories were raw, emotional, and powerful. One story featured a retired schoolteacher named Clara, who had been struggling with mobility issues for years. Her independence was limited, and she had to rely on others for basic tasks like getting to doctor's appointments. But with the app's new platform, Clara could now drive herself to those appointments, navigate more confidently, and feel a sense of autonomy that she hadn't felt in years. Another story focused on a young father, Michael, who had a son with a hearing impairment. The app had allowed them to have conversations in the car without interruptions, breaking down communication barriers and strengthening their relationship. These stories resonated with people. They weren't just testimonials about a product. They were about human experiences. They were about people regaining control of their lives. Jake and the team knew that this was the message they needed to focus on. The campaign took off faster than Jake could have imagined. Clara's story, in particular, went viral. It was shared thousands of times on social media, sparking conversations about accessibility, independence, and the future of technology and transportation. People weren't just talking about the app, they were talking about the way it had changed Clara's life. A well-known disability advocate, Olivia Davis, shared the story in a widely read blog post. She praised the app's positive impact, calling it a true example of technology used to empower the most vulnerable in our society. Jake's phone rang off the hook again, but this time, the calls were filled with praise, not criticism. The narrative had shifted, and it was resonating with people on a deep, emotional level. By the end of the week, the Real Lives, Real Change campaign had garnered more media attention than any feature release could have ever achieved. Even the competitors had to acknowledge the power of what Jake and his team had done. The pressure hadn't fully lifted, but Jake could feel a shift in the momentum. They had found their voice again, and people were listening. The story they had told was compelling, but now they needed to back it up with action. That's when Elon Musk himself reached out. Jake's phone buzzed one morning with a message he didn't expect. It was from an unrecognized number, but the message was unmistakable. "Jake, great work with the campaign. I've been following your progress. Let's meet up and discuss where we go from here. I have some ideas for the next phase of the project." L. Jake read the message 3 times before he could even process it. This was it. The opportunity he had dreamed of was right in front of him. A few days later, Jake stood in a sleek conference room at Tesla's headquarters, anxiously waiting for Elon Musk to arrive. He had prepared for this meeting, but nothing could fully prepare him for sitting across from one of the most visionary entrepreneurs in the world. Elon entered the room, his usual confidence in full force. He offered Jake a handshake. "Jake, it's good to finally meet you in person. I've been following your work. What you're doing is incredible." Jake, trying to keep his composure, shook Elon's hand. "Thank you, Elon. It means a lot to hear that from you." Elon didn't waste any time. "Look, I've been thinking about this for a while. What you're doing with accessibility is great, but it's time to take it to the next level. I want to partner with you to make this not just an app, but an entire platform integrated into every Tesla vehicle. A system that defines accessibility for the future. We're talking about a revolution here, Jake." Jake's heart raced. "That's incredible, Elon. But what would this partnership look like?" Elon leaned forward, his eyes shining with excitement. "We can integrate your platform into every Tesla vehicle, making it the standard. We're talking about not just accessibility, but also sustainability, AI, health monitoring, you name it. I'm ready to pour resources into this, but I need your vision and commitment." Jake could hardly believe what he was hearing. This was everything they had worked for, and more. It was the opportunity to scale beyond anything he had ever imagined. The meeting ended with a handshake and a shared vision for the future. Jake knew that this was the tipping point. With Tesla's support, they could take their platform global and redefine accessibility in the automotive industry. But it wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges ahead. More competitors, more pressure, and more obstacles to overcome. However, Jake had learned that with vision, passion, and the right partnerships, nothing was impossible. And as he walked out of Tesla's headquarters, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about creating a future where everyone, no matter their abilities, could drive into a world of possibility. After the breakthrough meeting with Elon Musk, Jake felt both exhilarated and overwhelmed. The weight of what they were about to embark on settled heavily on his shoulders. Tesla's offer was not just a partnership. It was a lifeline, an opportunity to transform their app into something far greater than they had ever imagined. With Elon's backing, they could expand beyond the limitations of a small team and a niche product. But with this opportunity came a mountain of challenges. A week after the meeting, Jake was back at his desk, staring at the contract from Tesla. The agreement was comprehensive. Tesla would integrate Jake's platform into every vehicle model, making it a standard feature for all Tesla users with accessibility needs. Tesla would handle the hardware, and Jake's team would continue to refine and improve the software. In return, Jake's company would receive a significant investment and, perhaps more importantly, a high-profile partnership that would catapult their product into the spotlight. "This is it," Sophia said one afternoon, looking over the contract with Jake. "We've been waiting for an opportunity like this, but we need to be careful. Scaling like this, it could change everything." Marcus was already thinking ahead. "We'll need to bring in more talent. Our current team isn't big enough to handle the volume of work that's coming our way. We need engineers, designers, product managers. It's going to take everything we have, and more." Jake nodded. "I know, but we can't let fear of growth hold us back. This is the moment we've worked for." With the Tesla deal secured, Jake and his team went into overdrive. They started recruiting new talent from across the tech industry: engineers, designers, data scientists, and AI specialists. The goal was to create a team capable of scaling their platform to meet the demands of Tesla's global user base. The process was more difficult than Jake had anticipated. The tech industry was competitive, and attracting top talent meant convincing potential hires not just of the potential financial reward, but of the purpose-driven nature of the work. They weren't just building an app, they were building a platform that would change lives. Sophia took charge of the hiring process, ensuring that every candidate understood the mission and the impact they would have on the project. "We're not just looking for coders," she said. "We're looking for people who are passionate about accessibility and want to make a real difference in the world." As the team grew, so did the challenges. With more people came more ideas, more opinions, and more complexity. The streamlined decision-making process they had relied on in the early days was now harder to maintain. There were disagreements about design choices, technical features, and the overall direction of the platform. Jake found himself spending more and more time in meetings, managing personalities and priorities, rather than coding or working directly on the product. The growing bureaucracy was frustrating. He missed the days when things moved quickly, when they could pivot with ease and adapt to change in an instant. "Is this what it's always going to be like?" Jake asked Sophia late one night, the two of them sitting in the now crowded office. "I feel like we've lost our agility. The company's growing so fast that we're just trying to keep up." Sophia nodded sympathetically. "I hear you. But we're building something that's going to change the world, Jake. And that comes with some growing pains. We'll find our rhythm. We just need to stick to our core mission, what we've always believed in." It was a moment of clarity for Jake. He realized that while scaling a business meant navigating the complexities of management, the heart of the project had to stay the same. They needed to remain focused on their mission, to make accessibility in vehicles something that could change lives. As the months passed, the pressure intensified. Tesla was counting on them to deliver a seamless integration into their vehicles, and the timeline was tight. Jake's team had to ensure that the platform was not only functional but also fully optimized for every model Tesla produced, from the most basic to the high-end variants. Jake was in constant communication with Tesla's engineers and product managers. Every day brought a new set of challenges. The integration wasn't as simple as plugging in the platform and letting it run. It required constant adjustments, testing, and improvements. They needed to ensure that the app's accessibility features worked flawlessly with Tesla's cutting-edge technology, which was always evolving. "The platform's integration is more complex than we thought," Marcus admitted one evening, reviewing test results with the team. "Tesla's hardware is top-notch, but their software and user interface are constantly being updated. We have to make sure our app stays compatible with every update they release." The team worked long hours, testing, debugging, and refining. But despite the pressure, there was a sense of excitement in the air. This was their moment. If they could make this work, they would not only secure their place in the tech industry, they would be at the forefront of an entire revolution in accessible technology. After months of testing and refinement, the time had come for the first public trial. Jake and his team were ready to see their platform integrated into real Tesla vehicles, with real users. The trial would take place in California, where Tesla had a large base of loyal customers. The goal was simple: get feedback from actual drivers with disabilities, test the app in real-world conditions, and make final adjustments before the official launch. Jake felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. This was the moment that would determine whether all their hard work would pay off. Would people love the platform? Would it work as seamlessly as they had promised? The trial began, and the feedback flooded in. The platform was met with overwhelming positivity. Users with various disabilities praised the ease of use, the level of customization, and the seamless integration with Tesla's system. For many, the ability to control in-car features through voice commands or simple touch gestures was revolutionary. They were no longer limited by the traditional boundaries of accessibility in vehicles. But there were also challenges. Some users experienced bugs with certain voice commands, while others had trouble syncing the app with their vehicle settings. Jake and his team worked tirelessly to address these issues, iterating quickly based on user feedback. They were learning on the fly, adjusting the platform to better serve the diverse needs of their users. The public trial was a success, but the team knew they couldn't rest on their laurels. The global launch was looming, and there was still much work to do. Jake's mind raced as they entered the final phase of development. Tesla's marketing machine was ramping up, and soon, the world would know about the platform they had worked so hard to build. Sophia, Marcus, and the rest of the team were exhausted but resolute. They knew that this launch had the potential to change not only their company's future but the lives of millions of people around the world. "Let's make sure we're ready for the big day," Jake said to the team, standing before them as they prepared for the final push. "This isn't just about launching a product, it's about fulfilling a promise. We're going to change the world, one car at a time." The final countdown had begun. Jake sat in a private conference room at Tesla's headquarters, staring at his laptop screen. His hands trembled slightly as he clicked through the final preparations for the global launch. The partnership was no longer just a dream. It was a reality. The press release had gone out, the marketing campaign was in full swing, and soon, millions of people would know about the accessibility platform his team had worked tirelessly to build. It was time for the world to see what they had accomplished. Jake had never been good with attention. He preferred working quietly behind the scenes, solving problems, writing code, and making things work. But now, he had to step into the spotlight. Tesla's PR team had arranged interviews, speaking engagements, and media appearances. It was overwhelming, but Jake knew that this moment was bigger than any individual. The buzz around the launch had been growing for months. From the moment Tesla's CEO, Elon Musk, tweeted about the collaboration, the media had been all over it. News outlets from around the world had picked up the story, and the tech world was abuzz. People were talking about how this platform could change the future of transportation for people with disabilities. For Jake, this was a dream realized, but he also felt the weight of the responsibility that came with it. "This is what we've been working for," Sophia said one morning, sitting across from Jake in the conference room. "But are you ready for it? I know it's a lot, but you've earned this." Jake sighed, leaning back in his chair. "It's hard to believe it's finally happening. I don't want to mess this up, Sophia. What if we fail?" Sophia gave him a reassuring smile. "Failure isn't an option. You've built something incredible, and you've surrounded yourself with an amazing team. We're ready." Jake took a deep breath. She was right. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about all of them, all the people who had believed in this project from the very beginning. The late nights, the sacrifices, the failures, they had all led to this moment. The global launch event was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. The venue? The Tesla Gigafactory in Fremont, California. It was a massive stage, one that Elon Musk himself had helped design, to showcase the future of electric vehicles and technological innovation. As Jake stood backstage, watching the hustle and bustle of the media teams, the cameras, and the Tesla team, his nerves kicked into overdrive. Sophia and Marcus stood beside him, offering words of encouragement. "You're going to do great," Marcus said. "You've got this." Jake nodded, though he felt like his heart might leap out of his chest. The moment Elon stepped onto the stage, signaling the start of the event, Jake's stomach tightened. The lights brightened, and the crowd's energy grew. It was showtime. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today." Elon Musk's voice echoed through the massive hall. The audience quieted, hanging on every word. "We're here to talk about something that has the potential to change lives, not just for those who are already using our vehicles, but for millions of people worldwide who have long been overlooked. Today, we are announcing our partnership with a startup that's focused on accessibility, an app that will be integrated into every Tesla vehicle, making our cars not just smarter, but more inclusive. Welcome to a new era of transportation." Jake's heart raced as Elon gestured to him. "I'd like to introduce you to Jake Williams, the founder of this incredible company and the visionary behind the platform that will change the way we drive." The crowd erupted in applause as Jake walked onto the stage. He adjusted the microphone and smiled, trying to push down the nerves. He had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, but nothing could have prepared him for the real thing. "Thank you, Elon, and thank you to everyone here today," Jake began, his voice shaky at first. "This is a moment I never could have imagined when I first started this journey. My team and I set out to solve a simple problem. How can we make transportation more accessible for everyone, no matter their abilities? And today, we're standing on the cusp of something truly revolutionary." Jake paused, his mind clearing as he focused on the message he wanted to share. "It's not just about technology. It's about changing the way we think about accessibility. For so long, people with disabilities have had to adapt to the world around them. But what if the world could adapt to them? What if technology, innovation, and design could meet people where they are, rather than forcing them to conform? He glanced out at the audience, seeing the faces of reporters, industry experts, and Tesla engineers who had believed in the mission from the start. That's what this platform is about. It's about giving people the independence and freedom they deserve. It's about removing barriers, whether it's in a car, a home, or anywhere else. Jake could see Sophia and Marcus in the crowd, smiling proudly. He felt a rush of gratitude for them, for everyone who had helped make this dream a reality. I want to thank every person who has been part of this journey. The developers, the designers, the testers, the users. We've learned from you every step of the way. And this is just the beginning. As the speech ended, the crowd's applause was deafening. Jake felt a sense of relief wash over him. The hardest part was over. Now, it was time for the world to experience the impact of their work. The news spread quickly. By the end of the day, every major outlet from CNBC to Wired had covered the launch, and social media was flooded with reactions. People from around the world were excited about the platform, eager to experience it for themselves. Jake's phone didn't stop ringing. The team was flooded with messages of congratulations, media requests, and inquiries from disability advocacy groups. One of the first major stories to hit was from an influential tech writer who called the platform the most significant innovation in the accessibility space in years. But it wasn't just the tech community that was talking. Users with disabilities who had been part of the beta testing were now sharing their personal stories online. Clara, the retired schoolteacher from the Real Lives, Real Change campaign, was among the first to post. "I never thought I'd be able to drive again," she wrote. "But thanks to this amazing platform, I'm back behind the wheel, and I feel free again." The response was overwhelming. Jake and his team were bombarded with positive feedback, but there was one message that stood out above the rest. "Thank you for seeing us. Thank you for hearing us. This is life-changing." As the days turned into weeks, the adoption of the platform soared. Tesla vehicles equipped with the new accessibility features flew off the lots, and more users were signing up for the platform every day. But for Jake, the real measure of success was in the stories. Real people whose lives were changing in ways they never thought possible. Jake sat in his office late one night, staring out the window at the bustling city below. It was hard to believe how far they had come. From the days of struggling with coding challenges and funding issues to this global launch, this was only the beginning. "We did it," he whispered to himself, and he knew, deep down, that this wasn't just about building a successful product. It was about leaving a legacy, one that would redefine what was possible for people with disabilities. And together with Tesla, they had just begun to change the world. The global launch was a dream come true, but it was just the beginning of an even greater journey. Jake and his team had faced countless challenges, but their perseverance and passion had led them to this moment of success. Have you ever been a part of something that changed the course of your life? What was it like to see your dreams come true? Share your story in the comments below, and let's talk about the power of perseverance and making a difference. As the dust settled from the global launch, Jake and his team were still grappling with the enormity of what they had accomplished. The tech world had been buzzing, the media had been all over it, and the users were pouring in with their stories. But for Jake, it was the real-world impact that was the most overwhelming. Each day, Jake would wake up to hundreds of new emails, social media messages, and video testimonials. People from all walks of life were sharing how the new accessibility platform had changed their daily routines, given them back their independence, and made them feel like they were finally part of the world around them. One email stood out. It was from a mother named Linda, whose son, Ethan, had been born with cerebral palsy. "We've always had to rely on others to get around," she wrote. "But now, with this technology in his Tesla, Ethan can drive on his own. He's 23, and for the first time in his life, he feels free." Jake sat back in his chair, staring at the screen for a long moment. He had always known that their platform would help people, but seeing the impact firsthand was humbling. People who had never been able to drive on their own were now able to experience a sense of autonomy. It was a gift that Jake never thought he'd be part of. As the success of the platform continued to grow, the industry took notice. Soon, Jake and his team were being invited to conferences, award shows, and panel discussions. At the annual Tech Innovation Awards, Jake found himself standing on stage in front of hundreds of the world's top technologists and entrepreneurs, accepting the Best Accessibility Innovation Award. It was surreal. Just a few years ago, he had been struggling to keep the company afloat, wondering if his vision would ever come to fruition. Now, he was being recognized for his contributions to making technology more inclusive. "I can't tell you how much this means to me and to the entire team," Jake said in his acceptance speech. "This is a team effort. Every developer, designer, and tester who worked on this project made it possible. But most of all, I want to thank the people who believed in us from the very beginning, the users. You are the reason we do this. Thank you for inspiring us every day." The applause was deafening. But more than the recognition, it was the message that resonated with Jake. They were on the right path. They were doing something that mattered. As Tesla's collaboration continued to thrive, other automakers began to take notice. Companies like Ford, General Motors, and even newer electric vehicle startups were reaching out to Jake and his team, eager to explore the possibility of integrating the platform into their own vehicles. It was clear that the demand for accessible technology was growing, and Jake's platform had become the gold standard. But with this newfound success came new challenges. The team had to decide whether to continue focusing solely on their partnership with Tesla or expand the platform to other industries. The possibilities were endless, but so were the risks. Could they scale without losing the quality that had made them successful in the first place? Jake leaned back in his chair, thinking about the long road ahead. "I agree. We can't lose sight of what we've created here. But at the same time, I don't want to miss an opportunity to help even more people." The decision wasn't easy, but they knew that whatever path they chose, they had to stay true to their mission. Jake had always dreamed of making a difference, but what had started as a small project aimed at helping a few people with disabilities had quickly evolved into a movement. The success of their platform had forced the entire tech industry to rethink how they approached accessibility. Companies that had once treated accessibility as an afterthought were now scrambling to catch up. They wanted to be part of the change. And it wasn't just about cars. Jake saw the potential for his platform to transform industries far beyond transportation. The concept of designing technology for inclusivity had gained traction in areas like virtual reality, gaming, and home automation. With the right investment and the right vision, Jake realized they could lead the charge in creating a truly inclusive world. One afternoon, Jake was meeting with a group of investors who were interested in helping scale the platform. They discussed the possibility of developing new accessibility features for everything from wearables to home assistants, expanding their reach beyond just vehicles. "We're not just making cars more accessible," Jake explained. "We're reshaping what it means to be inclusive in the tech world. It's not about adding features for a small group of people. It's about rethinking design from the ground up. Accessibility should be the standard, not the exception." The investors were impressed. They understood that Jake wasn't just looking to profit from the success of the platform. He wanted to build a legacy. As the company scaled and opportunities grew, so did the strain on the team. The more successful they became, the more pressure they faced. More investors, more media attention, and more expectations. Jake felt the weight of it all, and it was beginning to take a toll on him. He wasn't sleeping as much, and the stress was starting to show. One night, Sophia found Jake alone in his office, staring at his computer screen. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said, sitting down beside him. "What's going on?" Jake rubbed his eyes. "I'm worried, Sophia. I don't want to lose sight of what made us successful. I don't want to get lost in the growth and forget why we're doing this in the first place." Sophia nodded. "I get it. But remember, we're in this together. We've built something incredible. We're changing lives. And you've always kept your eye on the mission. Don't lose sight of that." Jake took a deep breath. She was right. The mission had always been about accessibility, about changing lives, and about making the world a more inclusive place. But now, more than ever, he needed to remind himself that the success of the platform wasn't measured by how big the company grew. It was about the difference they were making in the world. One evening, as Jake was driving home in his Tesla, he thought about everything that had led up to this point. The long nights, the setbacks, the moments of doubt, and the triumphs. Everything had culminated in this new chapter of his life. He parked his car in front of his house, sat for a moment, and reflected on how far they had come. It wasn't just the platform. It was the community they had built, the lives they had touched, and the people who had supported them along the way. Jake realized that no matter how large the company grew or how many new industries they entered, the core of what they were doing had to remain the same. They had to keep their values intact, focusing on creating technology that empowered people, not just making money or becoming an industry leader. They had to stay true to the vision that had started it all. And in that moment, Jake felt a renewed sense of purpose. Success, Jake soon realized, was a double-edged sword. While the world seemed to be cheering for their platform, things were beginning to unravel behind the scenes. The pressure to grow, expand, and maintain the momentum was starting to take its toll on the company and on Jake himself. A crisis was brewing, one that would test their resilience and their commitment to the mission. It all started with a series of technical glitches. The platform, which had been seamlessly integrated into Tesla vehicles, began to show signs of instability. Users were reporting that certain accessibility features weren't functioning as promised. Some users with specific needs weren't able to activate key functions, while others were experiencing delays in the response times of their vehicles. Jake's heart sank as he read through the complaints flooding in. This wasn't just a minor inconvenience. The glitch had the potential to cause serious safety issues. What if a user couldn't operate a critical feature when they needed it most? The thought sent a shiver down Jake's spine. The problem wasn't just technical. It was about trust. The platform had become a symbol of progress for the disability community, and any failure, no matter how small, felt like a betrayal. Jake knew they had to act fast, but he wasn't sure what went wrong. His team had worked so hard to ensure this moment was flawless, but now the cracks were starting to show. Jake immediately called an emergency meeting with Sophia, Marcus, and the lead engineers. Everyone was on edge, the weight of the situation heavy in the room. "Do we know what caused the issue?" Jake asked, his voice calm but filled with urgency. "We're still investigating," Marcus replied, his face tense. "It seems like a compatibility issue with the latest Tesla software update. It's not just our platform, but also other third-party apps. But our platform's accessibility features are more complex, so it's affecting users much more severely." Sophia spoke up. "We've got a storm brewing, Jake. The media is already picking up on this. I've seen a few articles questioning whether we can handle the scale. The last thing we need is for the disability community to lose trust in us." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of her words. This wasn't just a technical problem. It was personal. They were working to improve people's lives, and now it felt like they were failing them. "We need to fix this immediately. We can't afford to have people doubting us, especially when we've come this far," Jake said. "We need all hands on deck. Let's get to work." The next few days were a blur of long hours, late-night coding sessions, and constant meetings. The engineers were working around the clock, trying to pinpoint the issue. Jake spent hours on the phone with Tesla's team, trying to collaborate on a solution. There was no time for delays. Every minute felt like an eternity. But the more they dug into the problem, the more complicated it became. The glitch was embedded deep within the software, and it wasn't just affecting Tesla's vehicles. It was also creating ripple effects in the other systems the platform interacted with, including the voice-activated interfaces and the automatic adjustments for disabled drivers. Despite the constant setbacks, Jake refused to give up. He had been through tough times before. This wasn't the first obstacle he'd faced, and it wouldn't be the last. He knew that if they worked together as a team, they could fix it. "We're not just solving a technical problem," he told Sophia one night as they worked side by side. "We're solving a trust problem. And that's the most important thing right now. We owe it to the people who've supported us to get this right." Sophia nodded. "We will. I believe in you. We believe in each other." As the hours stretched into days, Jake began to feel the weight of the crisis in a way he hadn't before. He wasn't just responsible for the company. He was responsible for the people who relied on the platform to gain their independence. Every failure, every setback, felt like a personal failure. One evening, after another long day in the office, Jake sat in his car outside the office building, staring blankly at the dashboard. His phone buzzed with messages and emails, but he felt detached, unable to bring himself to respond. He felt a deep sense of exhaustion, both physical and emotional. The pressure to fix the problem, to restore the trust they had built was overwhelming. He thought about the people like Linda and Ethan who had shared their stories with him. He thought about the families who now depended on the platform for their loved ones' mobility. What if they couldn't fix it? What if they lost everything they had worked for? He slumped forward, resting his head on the steering wheel, feeling a wave of doubt wash over him. The doubt was suffocating, and for a moment, he questioned everything. The path he had taken, the choices he had made, and whether it had all been worth it. It was Sophia who pulled him out of his slump. She had noticed Jake's exhaustion and came by his office late that night. "You need to take a break," she said, concern in her voice. "We're all feeling it, but you can't keep going like this. You need to rest." Jake looked up at her, feeling a mix of frustration and gratitude. "I don't know if I can, Sophia. This is bigger than me now. We can't afford to fail." Sophia sat down beside him, her voice soft but firm. "Jake, you're not alone in this. You've built an incredible team. We've been through worse together, and we'll get through this. It's okay to lean on us." Jake met her gaze and realized she was right. He had been so focused on the pressure that he had forgotten the power of the people around him. It was time to trust in his team and in himself again. The next day, Jake called in the entire team for a strategy session. They needed to find a solution fast, but he knew that they couldn't solve this alone. He reached out to a few trusted advisors and experts in the field, people who had experience with scaling tech in high-pressure environments. It was time to gather all the support they could get. One of those experts was Elena, a seasoned software architect who had worked on major projects at Google and Microsoft. When she heard about the issue, she immediately flew in to help. Within hours, Elena had identified a small but critical line of code that was the root of the problem. It was a simple oversight, one that had slipped through the cracks during the initial testing phase, but it had caused a cascade of errors across the platform. With Elena's help, the team was able to develop a fix and start implementing it across all the affected vehicles. It wasn't an easy process, and it took several days of intense work, but the solution was finally found. The glitch was finally resolved. The platform was running smoothly again, and the feedback from users was overwhelmingly positive. But more importantly, Jake had learned an invaluable lesson about the importance of resilience. No matter how successful you become, setbacks are inevitable. What mattered was how you responded to them. In the end, it wasn't the glitches or the failures that defined them. It was their ability to come together as a team, face the challenge head-on, and persevere. Jake took a deep breath as he sat back in his chair, watching the positive reviews and the media coverage flood in. The crisis had been a test of their resolve, but they had passed. They had shown the world that they could handle the pressure, and that their mission was far from over. After the glitch was fixed and the platform was back to full functionality, the momentum surged. Jake's team had weathered the storm, and their resilience had paid off. They had successfully navigated one of the toughest challenges they'd ever faced, and now they were ready to move forward, bigger and better than ever. The world was watching, and what Jake hadn't anticipated was just how much impact their technology would have beyond just the disability community. People all over the world were starting to see the potential for the platform to change more than just accessibility in cars. It could change the way technology interacted with people's daily lives. Tesla wasn't the only company taking notice. Jake and his team had always dreamed of expanding their platform beyond just one automaker, but now it was becoming a reality. Other global car manufacturers, like Toyota, BMW, and Hyundai, were reaching out to explore partnerships. And that was just the beginning. "We're getting inquiries from all over the world," Sophia told Jake one afternoon as she read through a new batch of emails. "The Europeans are particularly interested. There's even a government agency in the UK that wants to integrate our platform into their public transport system for people with disabilities." Jake could hardly believe it. Their platform had gone from an ambitious startup idea to a globally recognized product. He'd always known that technology had the power to change the world, but this was beyond what he could have imagined. As the team brainstormed the next steps, they realized that this wasn't just a business opportunity. It was a chance to revolutionize the way society thought about accessibility. Their mission had become bigger than they ever intended. And now, Jake had to decide how to balance scaling up with maintaining their core values. One afternoon, Jake met with a few advisors to discuss the future. They talked about the possibilities of expanding the platform to other areas, healthcare, public services, even smart cities. With the rapid growth of their technology, the potential seemed limitless. I'm starting to think that we're more than just a company that makes accessibility tech, Jake said, leaning forward in his seat. What if we could reshape entire industries to be more inclusive? What if we could design cities, homes, and workplaces that were inherently accessible, not just tacked on as an afterthought? His advisor, David, nodded. It's a powerful vision. Think about it. If we're able to integrate our platform into smart homes, for example, people with mobility challenges wouldn't just be able to drive. They could live in homes that automatically adjust to their needs. Lights, temperature, doors, everything could be tailored for them. Jake felt a spark of excitement. Exactly. And what about healthcare? Imagine using AI to personalize healthcare for people with disabilities. No more one-size-fits-all solutions. We could change the entire system. The idea was big, bigger than anything Jake had ever dreamed of. But as always, the challenge was how to scale. They'd already learned the hard way that taking on too much too fast could be dangerous. They couldn't lose focus on their mission, but at the same time, the opportunities were too great to ignore. Jake took a step back to reflect on how far they had come. He thought about all the people who had supported him along the way, the people who had believed in him when it seemed like nothing would work out. He thought about Ethan, Linda, and the many others whose lives had been transformed by the platform. They weren't just changing the way people interacted with technology, they were changing lives. It wasn't just about profit or success anymore. It was about creating a world that was more inclusive, more compassionate, and more aware of the challenges faced by people with disabilities. One day, as Jake was walking through the office, he passed a screen that was displaying real-time user feedback. One comment stood out, written by a woman named Sarah. "I've been in a wheelchair for 15 years. I never thought I would be able to drive again. But with this technology, I feel like I have my freedom back. Thank you for giving me my independence." Jake paused for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. He realized that this was the real reward. The real success wasn't in the accolades, the press, or the investors. It was in moments like this, in the knowledge that they had made a meaningful difference in people's lives. As the platform expanded globally, media outlets from around the world began to cover Jake's journey. Interviews, documentaries, and articles began to surface, portraying Jake as not just a tech entrepreneur, but as a hero in the accessibility space. One afternoon, Jake was sitting in his office when his phone buzzed. It was a message from a journalist who wanted to do an in-depth feature on his story. The message began with a familiar question. "Elon Musk has had a huge impact on your journey. Can you tell us about how his mentorship has influenced your success?" Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. He had been asked this question countless times, and while he appreciated Elon's guidance, he knew that the success of their platform was the result of much more than just one mentor. It was the combined effort of a dedicated team, the support of countless users, and the relentless drive to innovate. But Jake also knew that the media often sought sensational stories, stories of individuals overcoming the odds. He didn't mind sharing his journey, but he wanted to make sure that the true story was told, that their success was not just about one man or one breakthrough, but about a collective effort to make the world a better place for everyone. The moment Jake had been dreading, and also anticipating, finally arrived. He was preparing for a massive press conference to announce their next phase of global expansion. The room was packed with journalists, photographers, and influencers. The cameras were rolling, and the world was waiting for him to speak. As Jake walked up to the podium, he felt the familiar sense of nervousness creep in. But as he looked out at the sea of faces, he reminded himself of why he was there. It wasn't just to talk about profits or growth. It was to share their vision, a vision of a world where accessibility wasn't a privilege, but a right. He cleared his throat and began. "Thank you for being here today. I'm here to talk about something that goes beyond business, beyond numbers. I'm here to talk about the future, a future where everyone, no matter their ability, has equal access to the world around them. We've built something that I believe can make a difference, but we're just getting started." Jake spoke about their mission, the lives they had changed, and the future they envisioned. He talked about the team, the partnerships, and the endless possibilities that lay ahead. But most importantly, he spoke about the responsibility they carried. The responsibility to ensure that technology worked for everyone, not just the fortunate few. As the press conference ended and Jake walked out into the bright daylight, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride mixed with anticipation. The world was beginning to take notice, and the possibilities were endless. He had always known that technology had the potential to change lives, but now, more than ever, he believed that change was within reach. But there was still so much to do. The platform had taken off, but Jake knew that the real work had only just begun. With the future ahead of him, he couldn't help but think about all the people who had supported him along the way. They were counting on him to keep pushing forward, to continue breaking down barriers and making the world more accessible for everyone. As the company grew, so did the complexities that came with it. Jake and his team had always been driven by a core mission: to create technology that was truly accessible for everyone, especially those with disabilities. But now, with their success expanding rapidly, they were confronted with a new challenge, one that would test their values and principles more than ever before. The global expansion had attracted not only car manufacturers and healthcare companies, but also venture capital firms eager to get a piece of the action. As Jake sat in a boardroom surrounded by potential investors, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. They were offering significant funding, but with it came expectations. Expectations that didn't necessarily align with the mission that had gotten Jake into this business in the first place. "Jake, we believe in your vision," said one of the investors, a sharp-dressed man named Edward from a major venture capital firm. "But we need to think bigger. We can scale this, expand into other industries. Healthcare, education, even retail. The potential here is enormous, and we need to move fast." Jake glanced around the room. He could see the dollar signs in their eyes, the hunger for growth. These weren't people who cared about the nuances of accessibility or the impact on the disability community. They were investors looking for exponential returns, and they wanted Jake to take the company public, open it up to mass-market applications, and streamline features that could quickly turn a profit. As the discussions continued, Jake felt a growing sense of discomfort. He knew that scaling the company was necessary for sustainability, but this felt different. The venture capitalists were pushing for rapid growth that could compromise the very heart of the platform, its mission to create accessibility for all. The investors were talking about expanding into new sectors that didn't necessarily align with their original purpose. Healthcare was an obvious next step, but other areas, like retail or general consumer products, seemed to be driven more by profit than by the desire to create meaningful change. Later that evening, Jake sat with Sophia, Marcus, and the rest of his inner circle at a local diner, trying to process everything that had happened that day. "This isn't what we signed up for," Jake said, swirling his coffee absent-mindedly. "I feel like we're losing our way." Sophia, always the level-headed one, leaned in. "It's a tough situation, Jake, but we need to ask ourselves, what is success to us? Is it billions in revenue? Or is it making a difference? If we take this money, we're going to have to scale fast. And fast scaling might mean sacrificing some of the very thing that made us unique." Marcus, who had been quiet up until that point, spoke up. "But we've always known that growth comes with trade-offs. The question is, how much are we willing to give up? And at what point does growth start becoming a problem?" That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the people who had inspired him to start this company, people like Linda and Ethan. He thought about their struggles, their triumphs, and the trust they had placed in him. They were relying on him to stay true to the vision of the company, and yet, he was being asked to make compromises that didn't feel right. He thought back to the moment he had shared with Sarah, the woman who had written that emotional message about gaining her independence through the platform. It wasn't the money or the fame that mattered. It was the impact. The real reward was knowing that they had created something that truly changed lives. Jake sat up in bed, his mind racing. He knew what he had to do. The next morning, Jake called an urgent meeting with his leadership team. He explained his decision to turn down the venture capital funding, something that he knew would be difficult but necessary for the integrity of their mission. "I've been thinking a lot about where we're headed," Jake began. "I know the world wants us to scale faster, to make this bigger than we ever imagined. But I think we need to slow down and remember why we started this. We've always been about accessibility. We've always been about making a difference in people's lives, not just making money. And I think if we lose sight of that, we lose everything. The team sat in silence, digesting Jake's words. Finally, Sophia spoke up. I think you're right, Jake. This is about impact, not just profit. And we need to stay true to our purpose. If we can't do that, then what's the point of all this? Marcus nodded. We've built something special, something that's bigger than us. And I believe we can still grow and scale, but we need to do it in a way that aligns with our values. Jake smiled. Exactly. It's about growth, but not at the expense of our mission. We'll scale in a way that's responsible and true to the people we're trying to help. Not everyone agreed with Jake's decision. The investors who had been pushing for the rapid expansion weren't pleased. In fact, some of them walked away entirely, choosing to invest their money elsewhere. There was also public pressure, especially from industry insiders who believed that by turning down the capital, Jake was limiting the potential for the company to truly disrupt the market. For a while, the company's future seemed uncertain. They had lost out on a major financial opportunity, and the media were beginning to question their ability to scale. The stock price of the company fluctuated, and some of the team members even voiced concerns about whether they had made the right call. But Jake never wavered. He knew they had made the right decision. Slowly but surely, they began to regain their footing. They focused on strategic partnerships that aligned with their values. They worked with companies who truly understood the importance of accessibility and inclusivity. And then, something unexpected happened. Their commitment to ethical growth began to attract attention in a way they hadn't anticipated. Smaller, more ethical investors, ones who valued their mission, began reaching out. Nonprofits and advocacy organizations, aligned with their vision, offered their support. The disability community rallied behind them, reaffirming their trust in the platform. Slowly but steadily, the company regained its momentum. They may not have taken the fast track to success, but they were building something much more sustainable, something that was grounded in purpose and driven by a desire to make the world a better place. A few months later, Jake sat down for an interview with a well-known business journalist. The conversation turned to the decision to reject the venture capital funding and how it had affected the company. We've been asked many times why we didn't take the easy route and grow quickly, Jake said with a smile. And I've always said the same thing, because we're not here to chase quick success. We're here to build something lasting, something that will make a real difference. Fast money doesn't always lead to long-term impact. If we had taken the money and scaled the way they wanted us to, we might have lost sight of what really matters. The interviewer nodded. It sounds like sticking to your values has paid off in the long run. Jake paused, thinking about everything they'd been through. It has. We're not just a tech company anymore. We're a movement. And when you're building something that's bigger than yourself, you can't afford to compromise. With the ethical challenges behind them, Jake and his team shifted their focus back to the mission. The platform was stable, the global expansion was on track, and most importantly, they were able to remain true to their core values. But what surprised them the most wasn't just the success of the technology. It was the way their work was beginning to ripple out into the world in ways they hadn't anticipated. As the team continued to develop their platform, they noticed something remarkable. The technology they had built for accessibility was inspiring people in entirely new ways. The focus had always been on helping people with disabilities gain more independence and autonomy. But now, as word spread, it seemed like their work was touching more lives than ever before. One afternoon, Jake received an email from a young woman named Emily. She was a teacher in a small town in Oregon, and she wrote to share how their platform had impacted her classroom. I teach a diverse group of students, many of whom come from low-income families, Emily wrote. One of my students, Nate, has cerebral palsy. He's an amazing kid, but he's always struggled with mobility. When I heard about your platform, I knew I had to give it a try. We used the technology to help Nate navigate the school grounds more independently, and it's made such a difference. He's more confident. His peers are more supportive. It's like we've opened a new door for him, and it feels like anything is possible now. Jake read the email several times. He couldn't help but smile as he thought about how far they had come. Their platform wasn't just changing the lives of people with disabilities, it was shifting the way communities thought about accessibility, empathy, and inclusion. Sophia had been working closely with the marketing team to gather testimonials, and she was equally amazed at how the technology was impacting people in unexpected ways. One testimonial came from a mother, Lisa, who had been using the platform to help her daughter, Maya, who had autism, navigate public spaces more easily. Before the platform, Maya would become overwhelmed by crowds or unfamiliar environments, Lisa shared. But now, she can move through shopping centers, parks, even airports, with ease. It's not just about the technology. It's about giving her the confidence to interact with the world without feeling afraid. These testimonials flooded in from all over the world, each one showing a different way that the platform was making life easier for individuals and families. From young children to older adults, from public spaces to private homes, the impact was undeniable. Jake began to see a pattern emerging. It wasn't just the disabled community that was benefiting from their work, it was anyone who had ever faced barriers to mobility, independence, or interaction. Their platform had become a symbol of possibility. It was opening up the world to people who had often been overlooked or left behind. As their technology continued to evolve, Jake's team started to receive inquiries from unexpected places. Hospitals, universities, and even the military began reaching out to explore how the platform could be applied to new fields. One of the most surprising applications came from a major hospital system that wanted to integrate the platform into their patient care model. The idea was simple but revolutionary. Use the accessibility features not just for mobility, but for enhancing patient care. Imagine a nurse being able to monitor and adjust the needs of patients remotely, adjusting the lighting, room temperature, or even the height of a hospital bed, all through the platform. The hospital system explained that the technology could be used to make hospital visits less stressful for patients with mobility issues. With personalized settings, they could ensure that each patient's experience was tailored to their individual needs, improving both comfort and overall care. It's not just about people with disabilities, the hospital director explained. It's about creating a healthcare environment where every patient feels understood and catered to, no matter their condition. Jake and his team were thrilled by the potential of this new application. They had originally designed the platform with accessibility in mind, but now they were seeing how it could transform other industries too. As their platform expanded into more sectors, Jake felt a deep sense of responsibility. Their mission was no longer just about improving the lives of people with disabilities. It was about changing the way society viewed accessibility as a whole. It was about ensuring that no one was left behind, whether due to physical limitations, socioeconomic status, or the environment they lived in. "I think we've crossed a line," Jake said one evening as he reflected on the company's journey. "We're no longer just a tech company. We're becoming a part of a movement toward a more inclusive world." Sophia, always the pragmatist, agreed. "We've always said we wanted to be about more than just profits, and it's starting to show. We're touching lives in ways that go beyond what we ever thought possible." But with this sense of fulfillment came the realization that there was still so much work to do. The world had taken notice, but the journey was far from over. Their platform had only begun to scratch the surface of what was possible, and Jake knew that they couldn't stop now. They had a moral obligation to push forward, to continue innovating, and to ensure that the work they were doing would lead to lasting, meaningful change. One quiet evening, Jake found himself standing by the window of the office, looking out at the city lights. It had been a long, exhausting journey. There had been moments of doubt, moments when he questioned whether they were doing the right thing. But as he watched the world continue to turn, he knew that they had made the right decision. They hadn't just created a product, they had sparked a revolution. The world was waking up to the fact that accessibility wasn't just a niche, it was a necessity. And through their work, Jake and his team had given people something far more valuable than just technology. They had given them hope. They had given them a chance at living fuller, more independent lives. As the months passed, Jake and his team continued to focus on expanding their impact. They worked on new features, formed new partnerships, and continued to receive stories of how their technology was improving lives across the globe. They knew there was still a long road ahead of them, but they also knew that the path they had chosen was the right one. Jake felt a sense of pride that was unlike anything he had experienced before. He had always dreamed of changing the world, but now, he saw the fruits of his labor. They had proven that technology, when created with purpose and heart, could truly change lives. The journey had come full circle. What had started as a small idea to help a young boy with disabilities had become a global movement, transforming not only technology but the very fabric of society. Jake stood at the helm, watching the impact of their work spread across the world, knowing that the decision to reject quick success in favor of staying true to their mission had been the defining choice of his life. The platform had been more than just a tool. It had become a symbol, a beacon of hope for millions. People who had once felt invisible in the world were now seen. Those who had been sidelined due to disability, poverty, or marginalization were now empowered. And in every corner of the globe, there were stories of how this simple yet powerful technology had allowed people to dream bigger, live more freely, and engage with the world in ways they had never imagined. In the years that followed, Jake and his team watched as the platform expanded into sectors they had never considered: education, healthcare, urban planning, even entertainment. The world was finally embracing the idea that accessibility wasn't a niche. It was an essential component of any thriving society. Emily, the teacher from Oregon who had written to Jake years ago, had become a passionate advocate for inclusive education. She'd been invited to speak at conferences around the world, sharing her story about how the platform had changed her classroom. It wasn't just the technology, it was the mindset that had shifted. What if we could design every system, every space, with inclusion in mind? She would ask audiences. What if every child, regardless of ability, could thrive? Meanwhile, Lisa, the mother of Maya, had taken her advocacy a step further. With the platform helping her daughter navigate the world more independently, Lisa had founded a nonprofit dedicated to helping other families with children on the autism spectrum. The group's mission? To ensure that every child, no matter their diagnosis, had access to the resources they needed to live a full, independent life. The platform had created a community, a collective movement toward a more inclusive world. And Jake could see the change happening in real time. People were no longer waiting for the world to adapt to them. They were stepping forward, taking control of their own destinies. One quiet afternoon, Jake sat in the office, looking at a series of photos that lined the walls. Each photo represented a milestone, each one capturing a person, a family, a community whose life had been changed because of their platform. There was Linda, the woman who had first inspired him to create the technology, now sitting in a chair on her own for the first time in years, smiling with tears in her eyes. There was Nate, the student from Oregon, standing tall next to his classmates, his wheelchair now a mere afterthought. There was Sarah, still pushing boundaries in her personal and professional life, showing the world what true independence looked like. He thought about how much had changed since he first decided to pursue this vision. From a small, scrappy startup to a global powerhouse, they had faced countless obstacles, technical, financial, and ethical. But through it all, the one thing that had kept them grounded was their unwavering belief in the mission. "I used to wonder if I was doing the right thing," Jake whispered to himself. "If this was really worth all the sacrifices." But now, as he looked at the faces of those whose lives had been transformed, Jake knew the answer. The platform hadn't just been about technology. It had been about giving people their lives back. It had been about dignity, independence, and the simple but profound idea that everyone deserved the opportunity to thrive. As Jake sat in his office, he received a call that would further cement the legacy of their work. It was an invitation to the United Nations headquarters in New York, where he and Sophia had been asked to present their platform at a global summit on accessibility. The summit was bringing together world leaders, innovators, and changemakers to discuss how technology could be used to create a more inclusive world. "I think this is it," Sophia said when she heard the news. "This is our chance to make a real impact on a global scale, to show that accessibility isn't just a nice-to-have, it's a must-have." Jake nodded, his heart swelling with pride. They had done more than just innovate. They had sparked a global movement. Their platform was no longer just a product. It was a tool that could change entire systems, from healthcare to education to the way cities were built. As Jake and his team prepared for the summit, they knew that their work was far from finished. The impact they had achieved was undeniable, but the future was uncertain. With their platform now in the hands of millions, the challenge was no longer just about technological innovation. It was about sustainability. We have a responsibility to ensure that what we've built can stand the test of time, Jake said during a strategy meeting with his leadership team. This platform has to evolve, to stay relevant and continue serving the people who depend on it. But we also need to ensure that we're making decisions that will safeguard its long-term impact. Sophia, who had always been the one to keep the business side in check, agreed. We've seen how quickly things can change in this industry. We need to stay ahead of the curve and anticipate future needs. But we also need to remember what makes this platform special. The heart of it is people. If we lose sight of that, we'll lose the very thing that makes us unique. When the time came for the summit, Jake and his team found themselves standing on a grand stage at the United Nations. They were surrounded by dignitaries, innovators, and advocates from all over the world. As Jake spoke about the impact their platform had had on people's lives, he could feel the weight of the moment. This is bigger than technology, Jake said, his voice steady but full of emotion. This is about the future we want to build. It's about creating a world where no one is left behind, where every person, no matter their ability, has the chance to live a full, independent life. As he finished his speech, the audience erupted in applause. It was a moment of validation, a moment that confirmed that what they had built wasn't just a product or a business. It was a legacy. Years later, Jake looked back at the journey and marveled at how far they had come. The platform had grown beyond anything he could have imagined. It had reshaped industries, transformed lives, and sparked a global movement toward accessibility and inclusivity. The company had expanded into new areas, but its core mission remained the same: to create technology that would empower people to live without limits. And as Jake stood in front of a new generation of innovators, entrepreneurs, and dreamers, many of whom had been inspired by his journey, he knew that the work was far from over. The world had changed because of one decision: the decision to stay true to a mission, to make a difference, and to never compromise on the belief that everyone deserved a chance to thrive. The ripple effect had only just begun. Jake's journey reminds us all of the power of staying true to our values, even when faced with difficult decisions. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? What changes do you want to see in the world? And how can you contribute to making them happen? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue the conversation about building a more inclusive future for everyone.